Good evening and welcome to the April 18, 2018 meeting, hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission. Before we get started, we have a lot of folks here who are regulars, so I'll just ask everybody to please silence your devices. And also, just a general point that anybody who wishes to speak is more than welcome when we get to that point in a given hearing, but we do need you to come up to the lectern and use the microphone. That's for the benefit of the TV audience, not so much for us here in this room. All right, we'll start with voting the minutes of March, oh wait a minute, excuse me.
April 4th.
April 4th, yes, April 4th. Peter.
On my quotes, there are some quotes missing, and I went to the Falmouth website to view it, and between hour 25 minutes, 40 seconds, down to about an hour and 30 minutes, there were some exchanges missing, and I would like to add them per the Falmouth TV.
That's manageable, yes.
Yeah. Do you have it marked on your minutes?
There are a lot of dialogue missing. So it's on the Falmouth website.
Yeah, if you could note the point on the
You have the reference?
tape, on the tape
Yeah.
that you just mentioned a little while ago, and provide that for Susan.
Yes.
That would work. So I'll make a motion to accept as.
I had one correction on page 4. Sorry, second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. All right, request for a continuance to amend the existing order of conditions. Wigwam Sippawisset Trust, 8 Wigwam Road, West Falmouth, Massachusetts. This one's been read into the record a number of times, so I will not do that again. Mark, do we have it?
Yes,
A
Madam
new
Chairman,
date?
we have a request for a continuance of the engineering company to Wednesday, May 16th.
At the request of the applicant, we'll continue this to May 16th, but I would like to know how many continuances has this been?
Well,
4?
it is an,
I know we've never
it's
opened
not
it.
an RDA.
Yeah.
It's amendment.
It's an amendment.
and we've never opened
So I'm
it.
not sure we have a ruling,
okay.
a rule about
I'll second.
it. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Moving on for
I could
request.
answer that question if you
No, it's
Oh,
not important.
maybe later.
Okay.
Request for determination of applicability. Again, a note for people who aren't familiar with these different applications. For these, what the applicant wants to hear is a negative determination. That means that they are not required to submit another, more involved application, that this one is approved as is. All right. Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, care of David Martin, 86 Water Street, Woods Hole, Massachusetts, for permission to replace 60 damaged and failing timbers along the perimeter of an existing pier.
Madam Chairman, the conservation staff recommends a -2 under the state and the bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
Second, so moved.
Second.
So, Susan, yeah, Mary and I have to recuse ourselves.
Any comments from the board on this? Anything from the public? All right, you have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Cornelia McMurtry, Penzance Road, map 49-02-002-006, Woods Hole, Massachusetts, for permission to vista prune bayberry and beach plum on an undeveloped lot.
Madam Chairman, staff recommends a -2 under the state and the bylaw. Resource area boundaries not confirmed.
So moved.
Second.
Any comment or questions? Any-
Yes.
Yes, Courtney.
I assume that undeveloped lot is under the control of the developed lot for which this vista is being sought?
Yes.
Well, I
Yeah,
I
okay.
assume it's under the control of the applicant.
Yeah, okay.
All right. All right. Any comments or questions from the public? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous with 2 abstentions. Oh,
No,
I'm sorry,
no,
I'm
this
sorry,
is-
never mind.
With no-
Unanimous.
with
So
no
moved.
abstention.
No abstentions.
Well, I'm with intensity.
Or recusals. Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, care of Caro Frost, 1196 Sandwich Road, East Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to reduce canopy of trees to promote an endangered plant species.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, it's a little more, complicated than the usual RDA. We did do a site visit out there on Monday. Mr. Matthews was able to come out, and we met with the owner of the property, which was the gas station at the corner, and Mrs. Frost came too. So we went over the project and what the intentions were to, essentially create better habitat for an endangered plant species that's in the area. And, the staff report sort of summarizes everything as far as what the work activity is. I think we also emailed you the RDA methodology too. So I just wondered if, the commission had any questions on this, or?
Staff is comfortable with who is doing the work.
Yes, 'cause we would recommend a -2, just under the bylaw in this case, because it's a wetland that's smaller than, that's regulated by the state. And resource area boundaries would not be confirmed in this case, too.
All right.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from the board or from the public?
I just had one quick
Yes.
question.
Maureen?
On the deer exclusion fence, that's gonna be really tall, right?
It's about 6 feet tall.
All right, because they jump right over posts. So just,
Could you recognize,
Yeah, I'm sorry, you need to come up here, ma'am.
Up to the podium?
Yes, and please identify yourself.
and then will there be enough room underneath it for box turtles and everybody else to get under?
We'd be happy to do that. All right, so my name is Caro Frost. I'm with Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program. I am the plant restoration biologist there. The fence would be about 6 feet tall, a total probably of 4 square meters, 2 meters by 2 meters. And we'd be happy to make it so that turtles or anything else that might be in that area could go underneath it.
Okay, well, it's a standard requirement for fencing. Okay,
So
thank you.
6
can you
inches.
give me, is it 6 inches above?
I believe so.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think it's,
So if you give us
Whatever you
that
think,
standard,
Mark.
we'll make sure.
I'm sure Mark will work with you on that.
Okay, I'll make sure that
Just
Mark
not-
knows.
Just not big enough for a little fawn to
Fawn.
get in and not be able to get back to his mother.
No, we don't want that. And we know that there's lots of deer in that area.
And we remember that plant from
Yes,
the past, so we would like to see it come back.
Well, it's the reason that the CR is held by the Conservation
Yes.
Commission. So-
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, no, excuse me, I'm sorry, you have to go to the podium, ma'am. That's, I'm sorry.
Kara,
And please identify yourself.
I'm Cornelia McMurtry, landscape designer, Woods Hole. I would like to know what the endangered plant species.
It is a milkweed.
and I have one last question.
All right, one more question.
Yeah,
from
I
Lauren.
wasn't on, I didn't go to the on-site, but with all the tree felling, are you going to remove them or are you going to leave them?
It is up to this commission. If you would like them removed, we'll make sure that they get removed. But our thought is to leave them in place at this point and use them to a certain extent to block ATVs or other people coming into that area. So use them sort of as
A buffer?
an exclusion.
You're okay with that? Mark?
Yep.
Okay, I'm good, thank you.
All right.
Otherwise, he would have snatched that
Anything
tree.
else from the public, from the board? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Michael Dallaire, 7 Main Entry Road, North Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to construct an addition onto an existing house, install dry wells, underground utilities, and to enlarge the existing gravel parking area.
Madam Chairman, staff recommends a -2 under the state and the bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from the board? From the public? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Anthony Cipro, 91 Bywater Court, Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to expand the width of current driveway and install native mitigation plantings.
Madam Chairman, we received a letter, a note from the applicant this morning that they are withdrawing their application for this
All right.
RDA.
Thank you. Next, we have continued requests for determination of applicability. Robert Barker, 364 Edgewater Drive East, East Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to modify existing dock from a float ramp terminal float of 8 feet by 12 feet to the existing 10 feet by 30-foot T float.
Madam Chairman, this one's a little more complicated. The request is to, I'll just run through this quickly, that'd be the easiest thing to do.
Sure,
Madam Chair,
yes.
is that microphone close enough for the audience?
Oh, it probably isn't, actually.
Give them that.
Yeah, maybe you, Maureen and Courtney can share that one, thank you.
Thank you.
Steve.
I just want to give a brief history. There's a Chapter 91, there was an order of conditions issued in 1984 for this dock under Mr. Gianci. There was a compliance in 87. A Chapter 91 license was issued in 1991. The aerial photos from 91 conforms to the Chapter 91 in 95. And then 2005, there's a larger dock with a T configuration. And, there were some other issues that happened between then and now, which were corrected. But the point being now that so in an email from Chapter 91 licensing, they stated that, and this was in 2017, that the aerial photos showed the structure doesn't match the licensing from back then. And, they had recommended unless the configuration is brought back to match the license, then the license would be deemed void. Alternatively, you could apply for a new license. So, based on the configuration, it doesn't match the originally permitted dock under the order and under the Chapter 91. And staff's recommendation here would be, under the present configuration, that would be a +3 under the state and the bylaw. But if the applicant wishes to rebuild the dock in it's mostly a floating dock too, as the original permitted footprint, then we'd recommend a -2 under the state and the bylaw, so that it conforms with DEP 25-549. Again, this isn't a velocity zone too. That's the main reason.
All right, so the request is to modify the dock so that it goes back in conformance with its original Chapter 91 license.
Right, and I don't know if there's a representative here for the dock tonight.
So could you just quickly state the recommendation?
Again, if,
Positive,
well, it'd be a positive under this current configuration that they're applying for, but
under the state,
under the state and the bylaw. But if the commission would agree that if they decide to put it back as the existing, permitted dock formation, then there would be a -2.
So I'll accept staff's recommendation, which is a +3 under what they're asking right now, which is the current configuration.
Okay,
But if they do agree with you to have it back to the original, then it's a -2 and they can go ahead and do the work. So that's my motion.
okay.
So we wouldn't have to hear it again if we.
Correct.
Because it's been 5 years since you asked them to get it back to configuration before. So
Right.
will there be a time frame that it has to be brought back to?
It's up to the
Okay,
commission, yeah.
I think it should be, I mean,
Right.
they haven't, this is the season to change it, not
Mhm.
later, so maybe 60 days or 90 days or something, I mean, voting season's coming upon us. And that way there, then it's an enforcement that it's not done.
Yeah, so I'll amend my recommendation to a -2 if it's brought back, and it has to be brought back within 60 days. 60.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second,
All right, any other questions or discussion from the board? Anything from the public on this? All right, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Anthony and Judith DeShulo, 3 Maker Lane, West Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to pump, fill, and remove septic system and replace with a new Title V sewage disposal system.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, staff recommends a -2 under the state and the bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed.
So move.
Second?
Maureen, go ahead.
well, we had asked them to come back with Mouling versus a 2 to 3 foot wide trench, and I don't see.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I thought this was the Shulo, 3 Maker Lane.
We're doing this one.
Yeah,
Oh,
we're
I'm
doing-
sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry,
Uh,
I'm looking at the wrong one.
Yeah, they had met there was a question on this one too, was continued because it seemed like it was for increasing the flow of the system, but it is not, so they can leave the system where it's located.
All right. You all set, Maureen?
Yep.
Okay, so,
The motion in a second.
we have a motion and a second. Anything from the public? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Eversource Energy, care of Matthew Waldrop, 45 Little Neck Bars Road, West Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to install 1,200 linear feet of underground electrical conduit, which includes 3 pole boxes within Little Neck Bars Road from the corner of Chappaquay Road South to 45 Little Neck Bars Road. Good evening.
Hi, good evening, Madam
Uh,
Chair.
Did,
Well, I think because the commission had requested investigating the mole method for doing this, and the representative is here to explain.
right, okay, thank you.
Sure. So, Madam Chair, I can certainly explain the mole method and how we looked into it, if you like.
Could you just identify yourself?
Sure, yeah, my name's Matthew Waldrop. I'm an environmental
okay.
engineer with Eversource.
All right.
So we, last time at the meeting, the commission had brought up whether or not we had explored the option of a mole. We refer to that as an HDD, or horizontal directional drill, as it's commonly called, industry term. There's 3 reasons that we feel it wouldn't really be appropriate at this site. The first one is the space constraints, which I'll go more into in a minute. Second is logistical issues with construction, and specifically the cable pull through the conduit once it's installed by the HDD. And third, the unintended consequences of an HDD, which you might be aware of, commonly referred to as a frack out. So to go into the first one a little bit more, as you may or may not know, the HDD will have an entry pit and an exit pit on each end of the line, and that's where we would go in, install, go into our pilot hole and pull the conduit through the other side. Each end we would need a work pad to be set up. Those vary in size. Usually they're at least 10 feet by 10 feet, and the drill would be stationary, and there needs to also be a frac tank or some other type of equipment there by the drill entry and exit, so that fluids can recirculate in and back, out and back into the hole. A frac tank ranges in size, but usually they're about the size, I'd equate it to a box car. So you've got, if we did use that method, it would be, we feel there wouldn't be enough space for that at this site. We'd have to redirect traffic, there'd be noise impacts, construction impacts that would probably be more substantial to just using conventional open trenching method. Secondly, the way this would work logistically during construction, it would be a little more complicated. The way the mole works, or the HDD works, is we would install the conduit from the entry pit to the exit pit. And at the end, because this is an electric line, the cable isn't installed with the conduit, that's installed separate. So that would need to be pulled through. And I would compare this to if you're pulling a garden hose in your yard. You know, if you pull your hose a short distance, it's pretty easy to pull, but if you pull it all the way across your yard, it becomes a little harder. to pull the hose. So the same thing can apply to an HDD. When you go to pull the cable, a cable of this size, it could possibly damage the cable or snap it because you've got a lot of pulling tension for 1,200 linear feet. We have done this for smaller distances before, or in other sections where we're crossing a railroad or a stream, something that we can't really trench through. But in this instance, if we're going to be in the road the whole way, it would be better from a construction standpoint to install this just with an open trench opposed to an HDD. And the last comment I'll make about the frack out, I don't want to knock HDD too much, but there is a possibility, because we do it a lot, but there is a possibility to have unintended consequences with an HDD. As you know, when we go in to drill the hole, we have to keep it open to pull the conduit and the cable through. So we shoot down a bentonite clay mixture, similar to stuff that you find in cat litter. It just clumps up and it will hold the hole open. But sometimes, depending on the geologic seams, surrounding soils and fissures and fractures, sometimes that material can escape. And if it makes its way to the surface, when you have wetlands on either side, it can turn into a real mess. It's difficult to remove fracked out material without removing the resource area along with it. So in my opinion, I think the risks associated with just a conventional open trench here are far smaller than the environmental risks associated with an HDD, especially when you're dealing with sandy soil. And there's not really any feature that we can see now that's blocking us from installing this, like a railroad bed or a stream that we're going to be crossing that we would have to underpass using an HDD. So that's it. I can answer any more questions you have.
Thank you.
Well, I respect that you gave us that, how that works. But we were told that it's a 1-inch conduit.
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to correct that. That's actually incorrect. It's going to be 2 4-inch conduits. The cable that's inside those conduits is about 2 inches, 1 to 2 inches.
Right.
And the reason there's two lines, it's one service going to the customer, but we install 2 lines. One is a backup in case one faults, the customer won't lose their electric service.
Okay. So, and then the last thing that I have a question from Mark. This road had a notice of intent for it, and it was quite elaborate, and it took us a long time to get through it. And honestly, I think when you're just saying that you're going to vegetate swales and implement grading and pitching, I don't know how that coordinates with that old notice of intent that was very, very detailed. And I don't see how we have any detail of them just going in there and doing what is under a notice of intent on that property now. So how, have you looked at the old notice of intent?
No, ma'am, I haven't.
Yeah.
I was under the impression that, this was an existing roadway and that, we weren't directly in any wetlands. Our typical practice is, once we install this, we would restore the area to pre-construction conditions or better. And if, I did watch the tape from last time. I know you brought up the question of possibly water pooling in the road if the trench wasn't adequately backfilled. If that happens, I don't know if the contractor's here tonight, but what we've done in the past for the roads that are not paved is we'll have them come back and, fill those areas in.
Well, it's not a paved road, it's a dirt road.
Yes, ma'am. If it wasn't, if it did sort of slope in after we came in to backfill, if there was a void still there, which is unlikely, but if that did happen, we would just bring more material in and flatten it out to keep water from pooling.
I just feel this really should have been a notice of intent, to be perfectly honest. I'm not comfortable at all, because I know how much work and detail this board went into for the last one, and I know it sounds simple, but a 2 to 3 foot wide trench in a dirt road in the DCPC with wetlands, critical wetlands on both sides, and you don't even know that there was a notice of intent, and you don't have any elevations or anything to go by, and how are you gonna restore it when you don't even know what you have to start with except a dirt road?
Well, it would be restored to just whatever it is now in the field. I mean, respectfully, I understand that, but I'm just not sure what else we could provide the commission other than what we've already provided as part of this RDA. I mean, an open trench method, even though it is a dirt road, it's done pretty frequently. And we would, even though we don't have, a formal plan, it would be, it's gonna be what it is in the field.
Okay.
It's just literally digging a hole and, backfilling.
It's not just digging a hole, sir, because all the homeowners in there had to pay, and are all part of, it's on their deed for that road, so that's why this was a very complicated project when it was permitted. So they actually, everybody there has a right to that road, and they paid to fix the road. So I'm not gonna go anymore. I still think it should have been a notice.
Thanks, Maureen. Betsy?
So, but I just want to elaborate a little bit more. It's not like this is I live on a dirt road, and you could dig this trench and actually probably improve the surface of the road. This is a road that went through a long process that I think it's really important that you get that order of conditions, because there are places in the road where it's pitched one way or the other, graded that way, and there are already vegetated swales along there. So they're very, it's not just like you might leave a little hole in the middle of the road. It's, the potential is that you're gonna switch a grade that's graded one way into the other way. It's graded one way into a swale, so it doesn't go into the wetland the other way. So I think that your contractor should have the order, should have the, order of conditions for this road out on site.
Okay, we can certainly do that. I mean, if the order, I did know respectfully, I was aware there was an order of conditions. I haven't read it, but with the contractor, we can certainly review that. You can
Yeah.
make it a condition of this RDA that's
Yeah,
reviewed
I
on
think
site
that's-
prior to
Yeah, and it has to be
construction start.
returned to the same,
Yes.
pitch, and the runoff has to go into the same swales that are there, and you may have to
The old
improve
engineering
those
plan.
swales. Yeah, the old
Because it's an
engineering
engineered
plan.
plan, so reference that.
Yeah,
Courtney?
Who's gonna make sure this complies?
Well, I was just gonna say we could
well,
have a
presumably,
condition that staff be on site when the project's begun.
well, presumably you have permission of the homeowners to do this? Do you have permission of the homeowners association to do this? I mean, it's their road, it's not just whoever this service is going to.
I'd have to get back to you on that, ma'am. I'm not sure. I know, is this not a public roadway?
No.
No, but it belongs to a lot of people,
Yeah,
and they put a lot of money into
sure.
making that road the way it is.
I know typically speaking on behalf of the company, we usually don't get to this stage unless all the authorizations have been made. I was told by our rights group, our right-of-way group of people that obtain these authorizations, that this is the last one that we need. So I don't know for sure, ma'am, because that's not my,
I can tell you, I can tell you because I've had a lot of experience on this particular project. Sometimes things are done without any permits.
well, ma'am, may I
And
suggest?
we're not particularly happy about that.
Understood. I'm on a commission myself. I'm the chair of the Sandwich Concom, so I deal with these things a lot. And would the board be willing to make that a condition that we don't start unless we have that
Well-
approval?
Well, wait,
Well,
well, I want to ask,
Yeah, Madam Chairman, I mean, just, in a nutshell, just what Betsy and Maurice said. This was permitted under order of conditions before, that, they had to have this grade, from that portion of the road, from where it starts at Chappie, the entire length. Now, they're just going down to, 45, but all of that is pitched, like you said, a certain way, and that's done under their order. They do the grading, I forgot what it's once or twice a year. And so they have a big grader that comes in and does that, just like for what you said. So it drains correctly in the swales on the right side in that particular area. And then that would have to be one of the requirements. So I would recommend, to continue the hearing for a couple of weeks or whatever, so we find out if this can be done that way. You can contact the association and.
yeah, well, I'm not comfortable voting on this if I don't know that the association,
Right.
Has- yeah.
Is the contractor here for this? Yes. Do you have an answer in terms of, the construction methodology and whether or not this is feasible as we propose? This is the contractor, you can speak more.
We were gonna come in with a mini.
Could you just, I'm sorry, sir, could you
Scott
identify
Condino,
yourself?
Bayside Electric. We were gonna come in with a mini excavator.
I'm sorry, our recording secretary didn't catch your name. Could you say it again?
Scott Condino.
Thank you.
And we were gonna come in with a mini excavator and do all the trenching, and it was gonna be a 12-inch wide trench. So, other than that, I don't know what else we can.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with what you want to do. I do have a problem with doing it on
Right,
somebody
I
else's
understand.
land.
I don't know for sure, we could very well have that permission, and I'm just, my responsibility is just the environmental permit. So that authorization to get to this point was probably obtained, I just don't know 100%. I can't speak to that tonight. I'd hate to continue just for that if we do indeed have it. That's why I was suggesting if the board would be willing to.
I won't vote on this if I don't know you have the permission.
Yeah, I think we
We
do need
can't.
to continue it, I'm sorry.
We can't actually, because we can't make a motion on somebody, permit something on,
Somebody else's
Somebody else's
property.
Somebody
property.
else's property, yeah.
So we would be, just to clarify so I'm clear, we'd be looking for what's from the homeowners association that owns
Yeah,
the
they,
road?
whoever's on that order of conditions, which I believe is the homeowners association.
Right, all the people that live along the road. right.
Yeah,
they all had skin in the game, they all had to, it's all
Understood.
on their deed. The notice of intent was on their deed. And I'm sorry, but Scott said that it was a 12-inch wide, but it says here 2 to 3 foot.
Well, we were gonna go with a 12-inch wide trench, and then the boxes that they put in are 6 by
Okay.
6.
Okay,
So that has to be opened up to that area.
yeah,
The
but the
boxes.
way this reads is that it's a 2 to 3 foot wide trench the whole way down.
No,
Okay,
it's smaller than that.
that's what it says.
that's what it says.
It is,
How deep?
42 inches,
How much?
42 inches?
So 12 by 42?
Yes.
You're gonna hit groundwater.
Well, that's, the specifications of Eversource is that deep.
Yeah, what we would likely do, if we did hit groundwaters, we would just dig a recharge trench, either further up or further back and recharge the water. Or we would discharge it to a detention basin, like a hay bale or a filter bag detention basin to filter the water.
this is not beyond the scope of an RDA, I think.
Yeah.
So could I ask a few questions in terms of
Yes.
what the board's looking for, so if we do come back, we'll have everything we need?
I think we're
So-
looking for a notice.
Yeah,
So in terms of the signature, we would need a signature from folks that own this road?
Mhm.
yes.
The Black
Okay.
Beach Harbor, the Black Beach Hills Association. Black Beach-
Homeowners Association.
Homeowners Association.
Yeah, Black Beach.
That's what the H is for.
Courtney.
HHC.
Just so you understand, this is not that we feel there are issues with this contract, with what your project is, other than the fact that there is an order of conditions that governs this, and it's a very sensitive area, and it's critical that the road service be restored with all the grading that's there. And so our concern as a commission is that to ensure that that happens, and that the people who signed off on this order of conditions in the first place, who put up the money for it, who paid the money to fix the road, sign off on the scope of this work. I mean, it may, and I, so it's more complicated than a simple RDA. In any other circumstance, it would be an RDA. It's just that this one is more of a can of worms.
So assuming we get the permission, if we don't already have it, from the landowner or from the folks that own the road, and I noted the dewatering, I assume you'd want to have a little more info on that. Is there anything else in this that's not included in this RDA that you'd want to see?
Well, I'm not sure we're still talking about an RDA.
Or,
is the thought.
when we come back with the notice, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Steve?
I was just reiterating that you wanted to pull the existing order of conditions and comply
Yeah.
with the terms.
So that's an open order still?
I believe it's still valid.
The order? They have
To
the,
include this?
They have an open
they
maintenance
have to,
order.
the original applicants would have to
Oh,
choose to do that, and
probably.
I don't, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, that's an option. Since you're gonna have to talk to the homeowners association anyway, and if it's still open, which we all believe it is, but obviously you have to check. If it's still open, it could be an amendment on that.
Right.
Because we already have the plan, you would just be
Adding to
trenching along and returning it to the way the plan says.
But then we have documentation that that's done.
That, right, then we have documentation
So this
that it's
really is-
done.
yeah.
That would give the commission the opportunity to sign off.
Yeah, that would be the best.
No, understood. If there's already, that's why I was asking if it was open, and that's a possibility. The association or whoever that was issued to would have to agree. I mean, if this is not their project, you know.
Well, right, well,
that's
you wouldn't
why-
be able to have an amendment on that unless they agreed.
Right,
No,
But
understood.
that's the simplest way.
but they would have to submit the amendment, correct? I would
Well,
think.
no,
I mean,
he could do it
In his own
in
name?
their behalf.
Yeah.
No, in
Oh,
their behalf.
Oh, in their behalf, yeah, but I mean, they would have to be the applicant,
Yeah,
yeah.
We want to continue, or we want
So,
well, I don't think we're,
to, or we could withdraw, right?
I would make
yeah,
it
you could
positive.
withdraw.
you could withdraw this, I'm just thinking of the options. We could continue it for the purpose of you finding out how you would prefer to proceed from this point.
Yeah.
And then when that's decided, we could close this and open whatever it is you opt for.
So I wouldn't want to withdraw now, because I don't know if the association's going to allow us to do an amendment, and if they don't, then we've withdrawn for no reason, so
Right.
I'd like to keep this, if possible, and then if we can work something out with the amendment, we can file that and then withdraw at a later time, if
Yeah, it
possible.
doesn't hurt.
Right.
So when can they come back?
Yeah. I know our customer's anxious to get, this is his primary electric service, so as soon as possible, we request.
Mhm.
There's nothing about it.
I think maybe May 2nd.
All right, this would come back as an RDA for purposes of deciding whether or
For May
not,
2nd.
what's gonna happen after that. Is that-
So,
Are we agreed on that?
no, I just want to be clear.
This is
Uh,
a primary.
So you would be continuing tonight, and we would have to come back with an RDA, and then from then you would,
Well, you
Determine-
have this RDA, so I'm
Yeah.
saying we're leaving this open till May 2nd so that you can determine what the situation is and how you want to proceed from there.
yeah. Well, it sounds like if we can't do the amendment, we'd be doing a notice anyway. So
Correct.
could the board vote tonight? I mean, if you're not going to issue us a negative, just to issue us, have us do a positive?
Sure.
And then
Yeah, we
if
can
the
do
amendment
that.
doesn't go through, we'll just come back with an NOI. That way we haven't lost
We can-
2 weeks.
We can certainly do that.
That's what you would like. You're requesting us
To blow you up.
to have a positive. Okay,
Well,
at the request of the applicant, I put a motion on the table to issue a positive recommendation.
I'd like a
Second.
negative, but
All right, anything else from the board? Anything else from the public?
Jesus,
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous.
It
So
must
moved.
be, you
Thank
must have
you.
things that are like this in Sandwich.
No, we didn't.
more along the coastline,
Yes.
narrow lots.
Well,
much this.
this is a barrier beach, it's a DCPC. There's lots of wetlands there.
It is an existing road. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on to a request for hearings under a notice of intent. All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are held simultaneously under the authorities of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision of the commission is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. First, we have Town of Falmouth Marine and Environmental Services Department, Wacoit Bay Estuary, along the shore of the Wacoit Bay National Estuary Research Reserve, Wacoit, Massachusetts, for permission to conduct a demonstration project to evaluate oyster growth and the sedimentary nitrogen removal efficiencies for standard oyster biomass of 3 different aquacultural systems. The aquaculture systems include the installation of floating bags, midwater oyster grow cages, and bottom trays. The total project area is approximately 8,072 square feet. I am going to recuse myself, as is Betsy Gladfelter, because of the involvement of Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. So I'm going to turn this hearing over to our Vice Chair, Jamie Matthews. Give us a second to leave.
For the record, my name's Chuck Martens, and I'm the Deputy Director of Marine Environment and the Shellfish Constable as well. I'm joined this evening by Dan Rogers to my right, Tana Marie Rogers, and then Ginny Edgecombe as well.
Is this adequate
Do you want to?
marketing for you? Do you want it darker right here?
Yeah.
With marks on it.
Okay?
Sure.
Thank you.
Good evening. As I was saying, my name is Chuck Martens. I'm the Deputy Director of Marine Environment and the Shellfish Constable. Our department filed this request on behalf of project partners. I'm joined this evening by Virginia Edgecombe, Dan Rogers, and Tana Marie Rogers as well, and they'll be presenting this evening. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Dan Rogers. I'm a professor at Stonehill College. What we want to talk to you about tonight is an experiment that we want to do for a water quality assessment in McCoy Bay. Slide, please. What makes this project a little bit different than routine scientific work, which Jenny and I are normally involved in, is that this project is funded by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration with the specific purpose of collaborating with what they call end users. These are the people that can actually use the scientific information that we garner during the project, but instead of coming to them at the end of the project and sort of pushing data onto the end user, we incorporate end users from the very genesis of the project and continually consult with them and work with them along the way. So one of our end users is Roadway Bay National Estuary Research Reserve. Another one is MES in Falmouth. We have a broader group of end users that we consult with on a regular basis down here. Down here, where are they? On the bottom. Cape Cod Commission, Department of Marine Fisheries, and Department of Environmental Protection. So these are agencies that representatives speak to us periodically to sort of help guide our scientific objectives so that they get the data that they need. And again, they're interested in getting data so that they can manage their water bodies appropriately. Right? So that's sort of the outline of how this logistically works between all these organizations. What we're proposing to do, what we've been funded to do, is to run an experiment in McCoy Bay, in the head of the McCoy Bay, where we'll install 3 different oyster aquaculture systems. And I'm a chemist, Ginny is a microbiologist. We're looking at how nitrogen moves through these systems and quantifying how well these systems work under routine maintenance conditions to remove nitrogen from the bay waters. The ultimate goal is to provide regulatory commissions, local bodies, anyone who works within the environment, methodology to use these systems to remediate their waters. Slide, please. So I don't want to belabor the point because I know everyone here knows a lot about nitrogen in the water, but basically we've seen as population increases, we get a lot more nitrogen coming off the coast, going into the waters, and it ends up with this sort of green halo around Cape Cod. This is stimulation of the phytoplankton, or plant material, in the bay, in the coastal waters. And oysters, being not picky eaters at all, tend to take all of this biomass into their body, onto their gill, sort out what they want to eat, and discard the rest. And slide, please. Go one more. Yeah. So we have nitrogen coming from our houses, our school systems, businesses, whatever, moving through the water, the groundwater system out into the bay, stimulating this phytoplankton. Slide, yep. The phytoplankton are taken up by the oyster. The oyster either eats the phytoplankton, consumes it, taking some of that nitrogen into its own tissue, but a large part of it, if it's not the particular phytoplankton the oyster wants to eat, will get sorted on the gill and exported out of the oyster in the form of a pseudofeces, this dense pellet that travels very quickly to the sediment. And so that comes down here. What's interesting about nitrogen, nitrogen moves really easily through this oxygenated aquifer. It's stable as nitrate, it moves very quickly through the environment. In order to remove nitrogen back to dinitrogen gas, which is essentially inert for all of life, it has to get into an anaerobic setting, a setting that has no oxygen. That's what these sediments represent. And in these sediments, there's natural populations of microbes that will use this nitrate as we use oxygen. They breathe it to burn their carbon, to burn their food. And in the process, produce dinitrogen, right? Essentially removing nitrogen from the ecosystem. So we're interested in examining how efficiently different aquaculture systems with oysters can make this process happen, removing nitrate from the coastal waters and moving it into dinitrogen. Slide, please. So just for a picturesque example of this, this is put out by the Maryland Sea Grant Agency. This is Chesapeake Bay water. This is that same Chesapeake Bay water with oysters in it some hours later. Just to give you an idea of how quickly they filter water. They filter on the order of 100 to 160 liters per day, each individual oyster, once they get to be about market size. So we're talking about a lot of filtration through these animals. Slide, please. This cartoon is our basic setup of what we're going to do. We're proposing to install 3 different aquaculture systems. One is a floating bag system. I think we've all seen these down in Little Pond and Bourne's Pond. These are ones that are along the coast in Falmouth now. These are these black nylon bags. They hold animals at the surface of the water. You can see them from the land. And the oysters do their thing in the bag. We also have these are called oyster grow cages in the industry. These are a mid-water bag in Roadway, so they have floats that express on the surface, a minor expression on the surface, and they have subsurface cages, so we're putting oysters a little bit closer to the sediments with the idea that in order to move nitrogen from these oysters, the nitrogen that they excrete from their bodies, in order to move it from here to here, the closer you get to the sediments, the more efficient that transport is. Remember, we can't actually remove nitrogen from the system until we get it into these sediments and let the microbes have their way with it. The third way we want to investigate is to use these bottom cages. So these puts the oysters right in the bottom. They again are in these black nylon bags in a cage system so that we can handle them efficiently. But it gets them right on top of the sediments in an almost natural setting. It's not natural because in order to sample the chemistry and biology underneath the oysters, we actually have to move them so we can get to the sediments periodically, put them back down, let them do their thing. What we've asked MES to do is manage these cages, these systems for us in a way a grower would manage them. So if a private grower, commercial grower would stomp around and flip all the cages every week, we want Falmouth to stomp around and flip all the cages every week. From a traditional scientific perspective, we would like to do this as pristinely as possible and get the best data imaginable, but that's not realistic. We want our colleagues in Falmouth to do what would normally be done. And so we can get a real estimate of what's happening in the nitrogen and biology in the system. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is sum this entire slide with these 3 systems. We're going to look at each system, and we're going to quantify how fast the nitrogen moves from the phytoplankton to the sediments and ultimately out of the sediments. We're also going to quantify any changes to the microbial community in these sediments that happens during that time. Now again, the microbes that do this are natural populations of microbes, but by feeding them extra nitrogen, we might shift the population a little bit to the left or to the right of what they would normally. Imagine you have a building boom in Falmouth, all of a sudden you have a whole lot more contractors in our populace than doctors than we had originally, because there's more work for them. That's basically what we're looking at. Slide, please. So the big questions I see that would help this board get an idea of what we're talking about is how big is the experiment, how many oysters are we talking about, how long is this experiment going to run, and what's going to happen to the oysters at the end, and what do we get out of it? What does the town get out of it? Slide, please. So this is a picture of the Little Pond installation. What we're talking about in Woquoit Bay is not this. It's much, much, much smaller than this. We're talking about putting 192 floating bags in, 32 of these midwater systems, and 32 bottom cages for a total of 8,000 plus 8,072 square feet of area used. This experiment is 2 years long, so in 2 years they're all gone. Now, 192 floating bags sounds like a lot. This is what 180 floating bags look like. Slide, please. Just that little quadrant right there. All right, so we're not talking about a huge installation. We're talking about an experiment. Okay? Over the course of a year, we're putting in roughly 300,000 first-year animals and 65,000 second-year animals. Over the total 2-year project, we're looking at somewhere about 650,000 animals. All these animals will be relayed to sand flats that we will talk with the town. The end user will have say of where these animals go. they're not going into the commercial market, they're going out for recreation or commercial harvest, not by us. But that remains to be determined. We can talk to that with our end users. This board could have a say in some of that. Slide, please. So this is Woquoit Bay. So that's Vineyard Sound, Woquoit Bay. This is our installation up here. This picture is not to scale, so this is Webner right here. But if I put these dots to scale, you can't see the dots. So we're going to zoom in a little bit. Slide, please. This is the head of Woquoit Bay, so we're now looking at this area right here. This is the sand flat where everyone likes to go shellfish gathering over here. This is the sites we want to put in. We're putting in a total, we're doing an experiment of 3 different types, but we're putting in a total of 4 sites. And I'll get to this 4th little demo site in a moment. Site 1 over here is our floating bags. Site 2 is our bottom cages. Site 3 is our midwater cages, our oyster growth cages. And these are close to scale. They're actually a little bit bigger than scale, just because we want to be able to see them. This demo site is far bigger than scale. This demo site is actually only 8 feet long. And this demo site is strictly for education purposes. We're going to put examples of the bags, of the bottom cages, and of the oyster growth systems over in this demo site. And what this demo site is for the education programs at Webner to bring the teachers and the school children down and actually get a hands-on feel for what these things do some experiments on them themselves, and really try and teach the public, get the public access to all of what we're doing out there. Use it as a purely educational site. Slide, please. So where we're proposing to put these systems, is it a land-containing shellfish? Yes. There are native shellfish in those sediments. And for the 2 years that those plots are there, you can't access the sands underneath those cages. Again, it's a really small area. We've avoided the really popular shellfish areas. And it's only 2 years. It's only May to October. Everything comes out of the water in October, including the anchor systems that we use. Is it a land-containing eelgrass? Nope, it's a sandy bottom. No eelgrass in sight. As far as the velocity zone is, these systems are anchored with helicoils, so they're actually anchored down into the sediment. The helicoils extend into the sediment maybe 2 or 3 feet. They're really quite sturdy. There's no mooring. There's no cement block to be dragged around by heavy winds. In the case of a storm, a wind event, a hurricane, something like that, these bags can be removed. We can take them right out so they're not navigation. They're not going to be blown up onto the beach anymore. And again, none of the equipment will be in the water in the winter when the ice comes. It's all out of there. Slide, please. So what's the benefit of doing all of this? The primary benefit is this is a water quality project. We want to see how we can use these systems to remediate our coastal waters. And DMF and DEP are interested in this project because they're looking at ways to quantify these cleaner waters. And this is one of the ways that we're going to do this. This data is going to speak directly to that. So we're going to use science-based data to inform local decisions and management plans. We're making this data available to you, and by including end users in from the genesis, we make sure that DMF and DEP and MES and conservation boards or whoever is making the decision, local shellfish managers, they get the information that they need out of the project instead of us giving them the information we think they need. Okay? We have a number of other projects that we're going to put out. One of the things that we're going to put out is we're going to try and get some potential markers for DEP and DMF so that they can have a single or a couple of measurements they can make in any shellfish system to ascertain whether or not it's working the way they thought it would work. Is it removing as much nitrogen as we thought it would when we installed it? Have we changed the microbial community the way we thought we would have changed it? Is it staying the same the way we thought it would stay the same? Jenny likes to call this the strep throat test. Does it work? Okay, something nice and easy. We have funding for a regional conference where we will present all of our information. We'll gather any shellfish grower interested in coming, all the shellfish constables across Cape, various different audiences, all these end users that have some skin in the game of this shellfish aquaculture, so people who can make decisions about the local waters. And again, all of our data is readily available. We also propose to do 2 sort of very interesting products. One is this new grower training course. We want to actually use some of our money to hold a course in the summer for anyone interested in starting aquaculture systems, teach them how to do it. This is how we do it with respect for a better nitrogen remediation outcome. And the other is publish this best practices guides, which DMF is interested in, because with every license that goes out, we can actually supply a best practices guide. If you have a coastal water body that looks like this, we suggest using a floating bag system, and we suggest you use it this way. If you have a system that looks like this, we suggest you use a mid-water system and use it this way. These are the pros and cons of these systems. If you have this system, use a bottom cage. Okay? So this is a document that DMF can hand out to anyone looking for a shell fishing permit. Slide, please. For local officials, again, we're an education group, so we're interested in actually disseminating our information. For local authorities, we're actually looking to do it through Webner's CTP programs, the Coastal Training Program. The Coastal Training Program runs many different workshops on Cape Cod on many different issues, but they've done a fantastic job of getting people in the room that need to be in the room to discuss these things, whether it's the Cape Cod Commission or local environmental consulting groups who are doing the work. They have a very good way of getting people in the room to have these discussions and disseminate this information. So we're proposing to use that as one way to reach local officials and decision makers. All the oysters that we're growing are going to go out in public shell fisheries. We're not holding these for any individual person. They're just going to be seated on the sand flats. That's still for discussion where, but that's a discussion we'd like to have. And we also would like to disseminate some of our information through the Mass Shellfish Association. Our outreach doesn't stop with the decision makers, but we also extend it up to the general public, the broader public. And to do that, we're using Webner Education, so that demo site that I said, that the teachers and the school children understand what's happening, understand what's the danger of nitrogen in their waters, and how we can actually fix this problem, or maybe able to fix this problem. We also can disseminate it wider through the country. Through NEAR is the National Estuarine Research Reserve System. Webner is one of the NEAR systems. It's a national system that has reserves just like Webner in every state that has a coastline, either on the ocean or in a Great Lake. We can disseminate all of our information through that system, and then transfer what we learned from our experiments to them. We have also have some money to sort of participate in Falmouth Oyster Day, set up demonstrations there. This is how we do it, this is how the oysters work, this is what we've learned. And again, seeding estuaries. Next slide, please. Yeah. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I'll hand it back over to the board.
Thank you.
Mark?
Well, there was one concern originally with where the plots were. You know, there was one that was located over by Caleb's Pond, but that's been resolved, so it's all pushed to, you know, where there isn't a lot of shellfish, you know, apparently. You know, there was a letter received from the from a local shell fisherman, you know, that everyone should have a copy of the letter in your packets. And today, I think it was, we received a note from the Division of Marine Fisheries. You know, they're a letter basically doing the review. And all they had mentioned is, you know, in addition to all federal, state, and local permits, the municipality is required to obtain a shellfish propagation permit from the Division of Marine Fisheries. And that's all I have at the moment.
I'll hold.
I had a couple questions. I mean, a lot of these scientific things sound good on paper, but the end result isn't always so good. And the reason I ask that is that in West Falmouth Harbor, for instance, there were some cages and scallop predator things, and they got left in, and they were in eelgrass areas. And my concern here is that the water depth, if there's already animals there, are there shellfish there now in these areas that you're gonna plan to put this?
There could be shellfish under, there's not tons of them, but there could be shellfish
So there's never been a shellfish survey done to where you're gonna
There was a
locate these?
shellfish survey done, Webner did a shellfish survey last year, but it didn't come quite this far over.
Okay, I just didn't see it in our packet. So you don't really know what you might be covering up that's already, the animals that are already there. So the oysters might be killing cohogs or soft-shell clams. Am I correct? I don't know, I'm not
I don't
a
know
shellfish
how many
biologist.
times.
I just know that if you put something on top of something, usually it kills it. So I would just be concerned that no shellfish survey was done in this area. We require that, you know, for docks or anything else. And these cages, from what I understand, are, I see them over in West Falmouth Harbor, and I've seen them in Little Pond, and they're quite substantial. And you only have 1 foot depth of water. So if the cages, when I see them in the truck, they're like that big. So are they just gonna sit on the bottom and chafe the bottom and
So
cause
they're
turbidity?
anchored to the helicoils.
So they don't move at all?
We can flip them, but they're not gonna slide back
So they
and
don't,
forth too much.
they don't shuffle a little bit and cause turbidity at all?
Not that I know of, I can refer to the growers.
So a little bit about these systems. We didn't just blindly select 3 systems. We went to one of the producers who produces the largest amount of shellfish gear, pretty much in the area, Ketchum Supply, and asked them what are the 3 most common ways, mid-water, top, and bottom. These systems are extensively used throughout Falmouth and also throughout New England as well. The third one we'll start with, which is the bottom setup. That's essentially on the ground, not moving. That's tacked to the bottom with helix. It's not going anywhere. What you do there is you access the bags from the side door. That bags come out, the bags can go in. The second system is a mid-water system, which you see those a lot used in Eel River. That goes up and down with the tide. Obviously, we don't want that one sitting on the bottom. That's not the purpose of this. We want a mid-water system. So those are in deeper water so that they do not come in contact with the bottom. There is some level of movement, just like the bag system, the first system, on the surface, but it's not creating turbidity off the bottom.
And how big are the bag systems?
So the bags that go in them are all the same size. They're roughly 20 inches by 30 inches. And then
What's the depth of them?
the depth of the cages?
Yeah,
I think that's what you're talking about?
Yeah.
It's about this deep.
So how are the,
About 2 feet roughly,
okay,
give or take.
all right.
And so you don't want those resting on the bottom. I mean, that's not the
And you have enough water there?
absolutely, yep.
Okay.
Sure.
All right, one thing that was kind of interesting when I saw this come in front of us with the notice of intent, that I'm looking at all the other aquaculture projects in the town, and we've never seen a notice of intent for any of the cages, I don't think, anywhere else, have we? Mark?
For,
For like Little Pond in West Falmouth, I mean, I've just never seen a notice of intent for them.
They blew up all over the beach this winter, man. I don't know if you noticed them. They're used throughout West Falmouth Harbor.
I know they're there, I just said I don't ever remember a notice of intent being filed for them to be put there. I know they're there.
Oh, okay, all right.
I mean, I know illegal docks are places too, but if they don't have a permit, so I'm just curious, you know, if we're gonna permit these things, it should be consistent, that that if we're gonna be studying, I don't know how you can just throw things in the water without a plan. And I know that you probably have a plan, but I think we should know what the plan is when you put these systems in the water.
Madam, I agree. That's kind of why we're here.
Right, oh, no, I was just asking why we've never, this is the first time, you're the first people that ever have come in front of us. And when you just showed me the picture of Little Pond, we never had a notice of intent for that, and we never had any for West Falmouth Harbor, did we?
Yes, we did.
for West Falmouth?
For West Falmouth?
Yeah, actually, so.
Do we have West Falmouth Harbor?
Totally
All right, is West Falmouth Harbor permitted?
West Falmouth Harbor, where
Down in the creek by Nashwina? Are those,
that was done through the EPA, currently not being used, it's been discontinued.
okay. I just, it's nice to see it come with a notice of intent, that's all. That's all I have for right now. I did read the letter that we all got in the packet, and it was very interesting. especially the diseases that they get, and once they get a disease, they can't be moved anywhere?
So anything that before we take them out and put them anywhere, we'll have them histology tested. That's just routine analysis. So we'll know they're clean before we move them.
Well, what if, with this, I'm learning a lot about shellfish propagation and moving and doing this. So if they are contaminated, and I know West Falmouth used to get all of New Bedford's contaminated shellfish, but I know certain ones they can't clean, they can't just be thrown in anywhere, they have to stay where they are. Where would you put them when you already have a healthy shellfish area there now?
So, first of all, that's a supposition, because we've been testing animals for a while. We've had, in the entire time of growing millions and millions of animals, we had one bad batch, which we were able to handle outside of Falmouth Inner Harbor. So it's happened once. Second of all, if it does happen, these animals, first of all, have to be histology tested. The word contamination is a word that's used for fecal coliform contamination, completely different than the histology work that's done on the animals. This histology work that's done on the animals indicates whether you can move them from one place to another. We're going to say, for instance, that has it happened in Little Pond? Has it happened in any of the other areas that we do it? We're actually accompanied by the Division of Marine Fisheries. When we pull the samples, we bring them together down to be sent out, so there's secondary checks on that. We're going to say, for instance, in there that did happen. It's not an issue. They can literally be eventually removed or harvested and placed. It doesn't matter. It's an open area. Okay. So it's not as if they would be in a contaminated situation. The only place that they would potentially be going is the first year animals would come out and be overwintered in a pit, and then returned, histology tested and returned.
Where's the pit?
I'm not going to advertise where our pit is.
Oh. Oh, well, as long as it's not in our jurisdiction.
It's not.
Okay. That's all for now.
You indicated that everything involved in this test would be out within 2 years. And when would any useful information be available? As long as you could string it out with a grant?
So the grant ends in 2 years. So there's a financial push to be done with this in 2 years. Typically, scientific publication will come out within a year of the close of the study. We have to actually report back to our funding agency what our products are. That's one of our products. We also have the data management plan is.
Ginny Edgecombe. Funding agencies nowadays are very strict about the release of data to the public. And we're mandated under this current grant to release our data before the end of the project. So that's before the end of the 2-year project. Whether we have a publication, a scientific publication on it or not, it's all going to be in the public domain. In fact, you'll see data released from this project during the project. Okay?
I'm Tana Marie Rogers with the Wacoit Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve. And the funding agency, which the money is coming from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I just want to add a little bit to what Ginny said. This whole funding mechanism is set up to produce usable science. It's not set up to just have scientific publications be published and not be. So the whole intent is to produce something useful. So I really loved your question, Mr. O'Brien, about when you're going to find something useful about this. And the reason, you might recall that in the initial presentation we talked about an end user advisory board. The whole purpose of that is to make sure that the scientists, that this does not happen as a scientific study that's done just by the researchers off on their own, kind of just doing something. That's the way traditionally it's done. In this case, we're setting up a whole advisory panel that involves key state agencies, local bodies that want to use this information to inform actual water quality management decisions today. So we have those groups actually involved. We're having monthly calls or meetings, regular interaction with these groups that they're going to be giving their input on it. And so the whole intent is to do things along the way, not just at the end. Of course, the entire body of the results will be ready at the end. But throughout the process, our intent is to keep educating those that are involved and to keep sharing the preliminary results and to get feedback from these agencies who are looking at the resource area and how we manage the ecosystem.
Thank you. Okay, a couple of questions, I'm not sure who should address them, but what's the depth of the water where the cages will be?
The bottom cages?
Any of them.
Any cages?
Any of them. So at low tide, it's about that deep. At our shallowest depth. At our deepest depth, it's about that deep.
About,
At low tide.
shouldn't they,
So our bottom cages are still submerged, they're not surface expressed. The only surface expressions that we have are the floating bags and the floats on the oysters.
Okay.
this is a little more specific.
What kinds of markers do you propose to prevent them from being hazards to navigation?
Sure.
The state law requires yellow hazard markers, so that's already handled in the law, in the navigation area. So we will essentially use yellow buoy markers around them. They'll be about 5-inch buoy markers.
Okay, and what is the impact expected to be, and what have you found out from the commercial claimers of their expectations of the impact of this project to their profession?
The commercial clammers, I wasn't aware that there's a clam flat right where we're working. There's cohogs there. There's a small handful of cohogs that are there.
Someone said the last clam survey was a year ago. Were you familiar with that?
There was a shellfish survey that was done there, sir.
Okay, and what was the results?
I haven't looked at the shellfish survey. It was done over in front of the boathouse, and it didn't go that far west.
So the proposed sites haven't been surveyed.
No.
Chuck, what's your opinion again of the potential shellfish impact?
My opinion on what's there, there's cohogs there,
And,
limited cohogs.
okay, and to your knowledge, do the commercial fishermen or the non-commercial fishermen use that flat?
We use most of our waters that are open. That's not necessarily a flat, I wouldn't say. There's a flat to the right of it. I can show you if I can step up here. There's a flat here, okay?
Yep.
Which is very commonly used. There are cohogs in this area, but certainly this is the populated area of shellfish. I mean, there are shellfish in that northern area, naturally occurring set in there. Absolutely. I think the other thing that I want to include here is that we're kind of making the leap that shellfish are going to die because there's cages on top of them and there's bags on top of them. In Little Pond, we move shellfish constantly from underneath all of our gear. At the end of the year, we relay them out of there, cohogs, and we bring them to other areas and seed them. So they do just fine under all the shellfish there. Actually protects them to a degree because they're not, there's less traffic over them.
Okay.
Sure.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to hear from our shellfish. And the applicant, you keep talking about we have money. Who has money? What is the stream of?
It's funded by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It's a 2-year.
To
evaluate these three
to
systems.
the town of Falmouth?
No, to myself, Jenny, Webner is another agency in it. The town of Falmouth is one of our end users in it.
But they're not a participant.
The grant is
You have to
made
stand
to
up.
Roadway Reserve with all the partners on it. So
Oh.
You need
I
to go to
should
the
come to
microphone.
Yeah.
Probably.
Chuck, you might help with this.
Sorry.
So again, the funding agency, they only entertain research projects from around the country that are associated with research reserves. So this particular, the Wacoit Bay Research Reserve had to be involved in the project before that money could be opened up. But of course, we're not working independently. All the partners on the project that have a piece of the work, they'll each have their own resources under the grant to be able to carry out their tasks under the project.
Okay. Does the
Okay.
town of Falmouth have a task in this project that's fundable? Are we gonna pay you to do some of this, is the
Is
question?
this I didn't know if this was this is a financial question, right? Not a conservation-based question, but I'd be happy to answer it.
Yes.
Sure. We have, part of the proposal is to actually have an individual who would actually go over there and do the growing work for it. Not myself, but
Okay.
a member, yes.
Just,
So there is someone who will be responsible for that and accountable for everything that takes place over there.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
I just have experience with having to be responsible for grants where other people were well-funded and I did all the work, it seems, but that happens sometimes. And the other question is, I'm a boater in Wacoit.
Sure.
And I'm familiar with water depth, and I was interested to hear that this is going to be 4.5 feet of water, and you have a cage that's 42 inches?
There's two types of cage systems. There's a cage system that's roughly, it's 2 feet.
The middle ones?
The middle one's correct, sir. Yep, and then the bottom ones are a little bit smaller than that. The feet are a little bit smaller.
I was just trying to imagine
Sure.
them staying underwater
Yep.
at low tide.
Yeah, so what happens is on the top of them, if you're familiar with Wacoit, you're certainly familiar with, the 21 acres, the site over the old Kelly's Shellfish Grant. Yep, they use those mid-water systems, and I believe they also use the bottom systems as well over there.
Okay. I feel silly questioning the scientists at NOAA and other places about this site, but I was
Sure.
concerned about the letter we received from the shellfishermen. So I'm looking forward to hearing their opinion. Thank you.
Jamie,
I know we've looked at a proposed notice in this area before. I think it was for a dock for Webner. Do you have data in the area where you're gonna locate this, or you're proposing to locate this? Do you have, data that you can provide of, water depths, mean low, mean high, and so forth?
I personally don't. I assume that would be available.
I mean, I think that's information we should have, particularly since your premises are based on that. And the other thing is, there's a lot of concern about shellfish that exist in this area. Have you done a shellfish survey of the area where you're proposing to do this?
No, so what I was trying to express earlier is that the shellfish survey has been done over in this area, but it hasn't extended all the way over here. This whole zone in front of Webner's property is heavily used for research. That's sort of the point of the property.
That's
Right,
fine,
so
but
right
I
here is
mean,
the nitric-
I think it's important.
Yeah,
that-
we
that
can do a
you
shellfish
provide
survey if
us
that's
that
what you would
data.
like. I'm fine with that.
I think it's, for us to be able to make a decision, we need to know, what the densities are and in that area where you're gonna be doing this, because, the potential for an impact on that existing population is obviously there, so.
We've looked at the floating bags over in Little Pond. And so what I can tell you from the chemistry is that the oxygen content in the sediment doesn't really change a whole lot over the course of a year or so.
I know, well, I'm concerned about about the shellfish population in the area that you're proposing to put this in.
Mhm.
So I'd like to know what it is, the board would like to know what it is.
That's fine. I
And
understand.
along with the depths, that's all.
I understand.
I just have one question.
You
And
say Courtney?
Yep.
so this is approximately 80-something,
Yeah, 8,000 square, 7.
and one of the things, I did look through my packet, and I actually thought I lost it, and then I looked through the real file, which is the Concom one. And we don't even have like a plan. You know, usually we get an engineered plan of the area and where it's located in the area, the depth of the water in the area, the shellfish survey. And I mean, a lot of information was there, but it's just, but not that. And that's usually kind of what we like to see. And the other thing is that if you have viable I'm just gonna say easy number, 8,000 square feet that you're putting these cages in a viable shellfish habitat that people must shellfish there, commercial and local and residents or whatever, that this is gone for 2 years, am I correct? They don't get to use that 10,000 square or 8,000 square feet anymore?
Yeah, right now the tax.
Yeah.
During
And how,
the time that it's in the water, May to
It's
October.
closed anyways.
Well, that's
outside the
pretty
season,
much-
so.
and then the other question, how often do you go service these?
Sure, so let me take the first question about the engineering plans.
Yeah.
I've reviewed probably, 20 at this point. I've never seen engineering plans ever for a shellfish, ever, for a application. They don't.
We had RDAs, we wouldn't have that.
Yeah.
Never.
It's a research project.
It's a research project anyways, so it's much smaller. It's actually, this would be a very small fraction of the size of even
Well,
what
research
a
doesn't make you
comparison farm.
exempt.
So first of all, they're not done, haven't been done up to this point.
Okay.
So that would be a first.
Well, water
As
depth, so,
far
because
as-
even when we've had aquaculture, projects come in front of us, they've given us water depths.
Yeah, I
We've-
mean, we can certainly provide
Okay,
water depths,
yeah.
no problem. That's easy to do. Be happy to do it. Easy. And for that matter, a shellfish survey, if that's what the board would like, we'd be more than happy to do one. No problem at all. Not an issue. If that would make the board feel comfortable and you would like that. But I would also say that I want the standard to hold that anyone else that's putting in a farm needs to do a shellfish survey, full shellfish survey on their stuff too, because I'm gonna cover my whole area, so I want this to be applied equally, you know what I mean? That's all. Second of all, or third of all, as far as servicing, looking at 2 parts to the servicing. The first part is to go out there and maintain the bags, flip the bags, keep them from fouling. That's usually about once a week.
What's fouling?
Fouling, when,
Oh, when they get hung up or,
no, that's when they actually have growth that happens on
Okay.
the top of the bags. And the way the bags work is half of them, a portion of them floats, so they bake in the sun. The animals are suspended in the water. So that takes place with your surface systems. Midwater systems, you flip them up out of the water, usually about once a week. Once every 2 weeks, you can leave them dry for a day, as long as it's not super hot, and then flip them back down.
so you
Bottom ones
just,
do
so
not.
you just turn the ones that are floating, you just turn them over
Turn
and
the
let them
whole
dry,
system. Yeah,
dry out?
yep, so as far as the midwaters, you flip the whole entire system and it floats on its floats, okay?
Okay.
The bags, just flip them once, and then they bake on the other side, that's it. And then the bottom ones, you pull them out, you'll shake them and flip them, but it's usually about once a week. The whole process will take about 3 to 4 hours, and then there's also the scientific piece to that as well, when they'll be coming to collect data. So that will take place as well.
So on the bottom ones, explain that again, how you
Sure.
do them?
Yeah, there's a little door that opens up.
Yep.
The door pops open.
Yep.
The bags slide out. You flip them over.
And
shake
shove them back in the oven?
Put them right back in the oven.
Okay.
Pop the door down. Yep.
I'm learning. Thank you. That's all.
Anybody else on the board? Mark?
I just have one quick question, more for Chuck, my ignorance on shellfish, but what is the lifespan of, the shellfish that, when you're growing? I mean, and after the 2 years, that will be like a marketable size, or?
Sure. So that's a great question, kind of the sizing on them. So after that first year, the second year animals, there's 2 groups of animals, as Dr. Rogers had explained. The first set of animals, the second year animals, those will be coming in at about 1.5 to 2 inches. And they'll be roughly hitting 3 to 3.5 inches, probably somewhere on the order of mid-July. Depends. We did some research work, and we've done research work with UMass, and we found that actually that area does grow particularly well for oysters. So in that area, for that specific gear and everything else, I would estimate animals would be to size in probably about 16 to 18 months, they'd be at 3 inches.
And then you said you're gonna distribute those.
Right, so there's
places
actually a
unknown.
new, there's a newly formed Shellfish Advisory Committee, and what my proposal is to go to that advisory committee. It'll have representation from a number of different stakeholders, and I'd like to leave it up to them where the stuff goes. You can decide where they'd like it, and we'll get it histology tested and move it into place.
So what is the typical lifespan of a shellfish?
So we would be pulling it out the second, like.
Well, but I mean, how long do they
Oh, they can live much longer than that. Certainly can live, these animals are very quick growing animals. They can go upwards, some animals 6, 7 years.
All right.
But we're not certainly holding on to them that long.
All right, thank you, I didn't mean to.
We want a motion or we want to continue?
When we get,
We need a motion first.
I'll make a motion to continue it because we need that, the water depths.
Okay.
And what else was the other thing we asked?
I'll second the continuance. So we're gonna find a date.
Jimmy?
I thought the applicant did the continuance.
But the applicant has to make the request for a continuance. We can say up or down.
Yeah, but I need a motion to get public comment. So he's got a request to continuance.
Yeah.
Or can we open up the public
Yeah, please open it to public.
now with the motion?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so, any more from the board? Okay, comments from the public?
We haven't continued the date yet.
Did you get that, Susan? I'm sorry.
What did we move then?
We moved to continue it
We can't.
because we don't have enough information.
Good evening. My name is David Brown, commercial shellfisherman here in Falmouth. And my issue isn't this particular project as it sits right now. It's the process that got us this here tonight. As you know, originally, that very prolific, the best soft shell clam flat in Roadway Bay was part of this original project. And so there was no public hearing. There was no Conservation Commission hearing on that original plan. And second is this is already underway without any public input and without any hearing before the Conservation Commission. There's those stakes are already all in. And I think any place that's has fixed gear, not just spreading seed on the flats, should require a hearing. The best we have now in Bourne's Pond, the best soft shell and hard shell clam flat is now all covered with fixed gear, and it's not available for us to fish. So I think this year, I have no problem with it. I think as a commercial fisherman, we all want our water quality the best possible. And it'd be ridiculous to fight it. In my opinion, this here is gonna have very minimal impact, but what I'm afraid of is in the future, fixed gear going in on seriously productive bottom, without any public hearings, without any conservation hearings. So I think that in the future, in my opinion, I'd like to see from here on, any projects that have fixed gear to have some sort of a hearing, some sort of public hearing, some sort of public input. Because I don't know if there are any other sites planned for this project. Just that right there. That there is gonna be, in my opinion, minimal impact. But if it had gone as I originally saw, it would have been disastrous for us. And I'm afraid that as the rotational aquaculture project moves forward, I don't want to see, I'm not against it, I think there's a place for it in town. I don't want to see it go into the best spots in town. I think we need to protect them. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Sam Patterson, member of the Board of Selectmen, but I'm speaking for myself, somebody who's interested in conservation and very much concerned about the nitrogen overloading of our estuaries and getting as much knowledge about what we can do to remediate the over-nitrification and fertilization of our estuaries. And I think when you have a project like this, it actually may help us in deciding where the optimal remediation might be located. We need to get this kind of data. And so I think this is a public body of water. I think it's not unreasonable for us to allocate a small portion of it for the benefit of the entire community and for the benefit of the environment that we have, where we're fighting right now to try to restore our estuaries.
Thank you. Anybody else? I think you guys are gonna wanna request a continuance, no?
Can I make one comment also, Jamie?
Hold on. Go ahead.
I just wanted, one of the issues that we weren't aware of is what we have in our packet shows that soft shell clam area originally in our packet.
Okay.
So that's why there was a lot of concern that this is, you know, viable habitat.
So I'll just clarify that. It was actually never proposed to be on that soft shell clam flat. We actually couldn't even do what we were doing on that flat. I mean, you couldn't have a midwater system on a flat that goes dry in the
Well,
low
I'm
tide.
saying that's where the confusion is. What we get and what is there,
You're showing.
they're different. So that's
Okay.
why, you know, it's not really apples and apples. It's,
Hard shell fishermen got that same.
Right.
yeah, that's probably why there's a little alarm.
Gash is flat, and it's gonna be shaded. That's what it's called,
You
gash
could-
is
yeah.
flat.
It was area 4.
This area? That area?
Yep.
Yeah. So, I think what you're looking at right now is our proposal to the funding agency, which went in last February, I think. And so since that funding agency, since we were funded, that was the proposed sites without actually going out and looking at the water. And so
That's what you gave us.
But this is what you gave us.
Yes, but that's actually not the maps from the NOI. That's our proposal, which is the supporting document.
Yeah, but she's just saying that's where the
Okay,
confusion.
yep,
That's
I
where-
agree, that's the confusion, I just wanted
Well,
to
this
explain.
is, this is the notice of intent we got.
Okay, okay. So,
No, so that, when you have a plan and we have a plan and they're not the same, confusion erupts. And then we're asking questions on things that you're probably wondering why we're asking questions and vice versa. So when you give us a notice of intent or any information, it should be what you are proposing to do, not what you went and got a grant for. Because you were asking for a grant for an area that we probably, if you did get the grant for that, you would never have been allowed to do it. So, you know, it might be prudent in your next grant round, if you have another grant round, to make sure that it would be an area that is pre-approved by us before you go ask to put something there that's gonna cost a lot of time and money for everybody and angst.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone can answer this question, but is someone else in Falmouth conducting experiments in our waters without coming to someone for a permit?
The town does. The town does.
So, I can't answer that question.
I hope
can,
not.
I can tell you what we're trying to do. We're trying to actually do this the way that it ought to be done. And so that's why we're here. I would like to see this be this is what should happen, and it should always happen this way. And had I known earlier that we should have come to the board, we would have come to the board earlier. But again, having not done this before being a scientist, we sort of are finding out as we go along. So I apologize for this confusion on the map, but these are the sites that we're going forward with. Yes, sir.
Gordon?
Which goes back to my original point, why can't we have a map that shows exactly where you're gonna do your work? Then there's no confusion. I realize other projects don't have it, but there's no reason why you can't do it. It should have been submitted as part of this. That's what your chore is. When you come back, have it straight. Have a map, show where it is, water depths, and shellfish, and we're off and running.
Okay.
What's your pleasure?
Can I ask a question first?
Yeah, sure.
So it sounds like you would like to see the water depth map and a shellfish survey. Can we provide that to you, or do we have to actually go to another hearing to do
Do we
this?
want to condition that, or do we want to continue and get that?
I think you need to provide that to us, and
Like this-
presumably that'll answer our questions, and it'll, we'll
Yes,
open the
sir.
hearing, take the information, and close it. But, because it's being continued, that may raise questions,
Well, he hasn't said that yet,
so,
So,
So you can request a continuance because you need to supply a site plan and a shellfish survey. You can also request that we just close the hearing, but then you take your chances, because we don't have the information that we're looking for.
okay, and having never done this before, can I ask what the timeline is for the continuance? Are we looking at a month out, or are we looking at,
Yeah.
what are we looking at,
If you
time-wise?
request a continuance, we'll give you a date, you tell us if that works, enough time for you to get a shellfish survey completed and a site survey done.
Okay.
it's gonna depend on how long it takes you to do the shellfish survey and draw up your chart.
Oh, so the time is basically.
Yeah,
all
I
it
mean,
takes to-
you start with that, and then you say, okay, we'd like to have it on such and such a date. Then we look at our calendar, and if we say that works, it works. If not,
Mark, you can tell us the next 2 dates, no?
Yeah, I thought Jen was saying the 4/25 is pretty busy.
But this should take,
May 2nd.
how many is on May 2nd?
There's 2 NOIs.
We can have the site map and the shellfish survey next week. And if that works for the board, that would help us a lot, because if we don't get the and I realize this is completely our problem, but scientifically, if we can get the animals in, they're awake now, okay? And we need to start collecting our data as soon as possible. So because we didn't understand the process, this is the first time we're doing something like this, we would have started this process months ago, so that we'd be in the water, 3 weeks ago. So time is of the essence. So
Excuse me.
we can do to speed the process, please tell us what the best way is. We can give you the data, what you're asking for next week.
Yeah, but
Busy next.
Oh, yeah, there's 4/25, and then there's, May 2nd. May 2nd has 5 continuances, 2 NOIs. The 25th has 2 NOIs, 3 continuances, and an amendment.
it's pretty simple. I mean,
25th.
Yeah.
We can
I
give
mean,
you the
it's,
25th,
it's not a lot of data.
So can we request a continuance until the 25th?
but you're gonna have to have that in,
Week from,
yeah, that ain't gonna
Yeah,
work.
yeah, the
how
information.
fast,
No,
how
'cause you'd
fast
have to
can
have
you
it
do
in
the
a week
survey
before.
and the,
So it'll have to be the second.
We can do it quickly. Like, we can give you the map. We have the map. I don't know why you have the wrong map. We have a map I could give it to you tonight if you needed the map. And the water depths, that's easy to provide.
Yeah.
The shellfish survey will take us a few days.
The problem we have.
we also need to see the material ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
We have a week, we have to have the material a week in advance so the public can look at it as well. So that's why the 2nd would probably, it's the only one that logically, legally, you can.
I guess we're stipulating there's cohawks there. They're there. I'm not arguing it.
No,
You know what I mean? They're there. We're gonna do a survey and it's gonna show you there's cohawks there. And that's what we're gonna find out, and we'd be happy to do it. But what I will say is that, a lot of the baby steps here is that I'm actually the first shellfish constable in the state that's had to file an NOI in the history of shellfish constables. This is the first tonight for a shellfish constable to do this, okay? Because shellfish constables, I mean, they predate the Wetland Protection Act. They've been around for 250 years. So this is like a first in Massachusetts. I just want to point that out. And I also want to point out that the team has done great work to make that happen. And we're certainly willing to work with the board and do that. But we likewise also would ask that take it easy on us, okay? This is the first time we've had to do this. First time I've done one as a constable for this, and we're happy to work with it, but that's what we're working with here, okay? So.
The only other thing we could do is close the hearing, and then they submit the information.
Right.
But
I'd make the motion to close the hearing, take it under advisement, Mr. Chairman, if you'd accept that motion.
You have to take your other motions out first.
I don't think the board can make a motion to continue. I think the applicant.
They did.
Who did?
Maury and Courtney.
I'm
To continue.
I'm confused here, so.
we have
If
two
you
options.
close it,
If we close the hearing, they can submit the information, and then we can look at it, and when we deliberate.
And in deliberation, we could deny it because we feel that the water depth isn't correct or there's too many animals. So that's the risk, you know, that's not the risk, but that's the practicality of it.
Well, we'll continue, but I want to point one thing out, is that we'll know more, these oysters that we're growing in all three setups are completely cordoned off from the natural population. They're in these bags, they're not going to get out of the bags. So they're not going to be mixing with the local population. And all of the molecular work that my lab will be doing will tell you more about these oysters than we even know about the natural population. So there's a next to zero chance of any contamination issues in transfer of microbes or anything.
I don't think anybody was, I think you
Okay.
answered the,
All right, I heard
fairly
some
well.
sort of concerns about
No, no, it's the
that.
water depth and
Yeah.
the animals that are there, that you're
There's
covering
no water
10,
depth.
almost 8,000 square feet of existing animals. I think that
Right.
was,
But I would like to respectfully reiterate that in Little Pond, where there was an operation going in shallow water and in deep water, we saw no ill effects on the oysters that were growing underneath the operation. So,
this is gonna be wonderful, because this data, we'll know that with this. We're blind on Little Pond, we know nothing. Now you're telling us that, you know, all this information, it's great, but it's not, we weren't privy to any of this information, that the animals underneath were healthy and whatever. So I think the
Right.
transparency of this project is wonderful. And if we do it right, then more can happen. And I think that's why everybody's a little, like, careful.
okay,
Because it is
All right.
it is a baby step for us too.
sure.
Are you people clear on what I think are two options that you have?
So I don't
You
understand.
For the
can,
continuance or to close the hearing.
So what I'm trying to understand is what are the benefits and challenges of each option?
okay. If we close the hearing this evening and take it under advisement, the information that we have requested comes in, members of the board review it, and we have no problem with it, then at our next meeting, we could
Vote in order of conditions.
vote in order of conditions for you, okay? If you request a continuance, now if Jen were here, Jen would be putting you somewhere in the middle of May based on past promises of agenda for the next couple of meetings, okay? You could have the time to get that material submitted to us, and we would review everything at the next meeting. And we could close the hearing at that meeting, and we would be able to close it on the following. But remember, if you go with the closure tonight, you're gambling that the information that you seem to be so confident in will satisfy the board.
I think, mid-May, I think scientifically is too late for us, so we would have to go back to NOAA and explain that there was, you know, a no-go from the town of Falmouth. So I think that the best bet for us, if Dan agrees, is to have you taken it under advisement. We'll provide the data that you requested, the shellfish survey and the water depths. And
Steve's made a motion.
But
Do we have a
Jamie,
sec-
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm not sure we can close the hearing, because that's new information, which means the public hasn't seen it. We haven't really seen it. Usually it's,
Supplemental.
I know, well, I
Right.
know.
Supplemental.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, that's fine.
I can't vote to close it. It's gotta be continued.
I vote to close.
It's new information.
Well, I have to withdraw my motion,
I-
and Courtney is second.
Sorry.
So we can deny the closing. And then,
Yeah, so now,
so Steve, you
Steve
have a motion
made
to
a
close.
motion.
Do we have a second to close?
Who made the motion to close?
Steve,
Second.
All right, so
So
all
Matt-
those in favor of
Any other
closing the
comment?
hearing?
wait, Marcus,
Mr. Chairman, so the motion is to close the hearing,
Close the hearing, take it under advisement.
but to
With-
accept the information that they're going to submit.
submit.
I'm not comfortable with that.
So can we propose to continue,
So we need
offer the
to,
continuance? And then you can take in the new information?
I'm gonna vote
To
against,
what date, though?
I'm voting against closing it.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just saying though, so if what I'm hearing is correct, that you want them to submit the data, even though, you know, the hearing's closed, they have to, it has to be going to motion that, you know, you'll accept that data, what, 1 week, 2 weeks after, you know, the hearing's closed, right? That's what we've done in the past.
I don't understand.
I don't think we can.
We need it. We need it to look at it in order. I'm not happy with
Can I
it.
ask a question, please?
Yeah.
I'd like to actually.
I don't know, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, sorry. Can I propose the continuance? Is it,
I think we need to go that route.
it sounds like
It
the
has to
board
be
would like.
continued.
I'm only comfortable with the continuance, only because I feel that if that, because then you could have the opportunity to shift. Say you do your soundings and it's too shallow, you can then tweak your plan,
Right.
and then we accept it, versus once we close it, that doesn't happen.
You
Correct.
can't have
And
that.
I'd like to take that advice and offer a continuance.
Okay. So
Okay, Peter asked her to draw again.
we can vote on that, or we can withdraw.
Okay. Yeah, we can,
Vote on it and then,
We have to withdraw.
Right. Mr. Chairman, I'm concerned about the timing as discussed by the applicant.
as we all are, but the information is.
Well, hopefully we all are. But
I am.
4:25, I mean, how fast we would have to get information?
Well, we have to
We're
s-
going to be into mid-May,
The
Well,
second of
if-
May will be the next.
and then we have to vote the order of conditions.
I
So it's
appreciate the
May 9th.
urgency of this, but, you know, given the importance of this to these folks, they should have done enough homework to realize, to allow themselves enough time.
well, I think, Steve, the other thing is when we had the Steamship Authority, when they had the
Yeah.
time of flounder
Yes.
restriction, and we voted it that night, and we did the order that night, and I think their urgency should have the same, you know, motion that we had for the Steamship Authority. This is for the public benefit, to close, you know, if we continue it, that, to the next available hearing, then we vote it and deliberate it and write the order that night like we did for the Steamship Authority,
So
for the
we
time of year
expedite
restriction.
that and get the information we want.
Right.
Okay.
And then you're actually, you're almost in the same spot again.
Mhm.
Even if you closed it, you're about in the same spot.
Okay.
So I think that's the fastest, cleanest way without putting you in a position of maybe being denied.
Okay.
And I don't think you want that at
No.
all.
All right, thank
You
you.
put too much work into it.
Thank you.
And I think and the shell fishermen have voiced their concerns, which were ours, that you're not in the soft shell clam habitat. If they're happy where you've moved everything, I think that relieved a lot of our concerns. So I would continue it.
You suggest we continue?
I would suggest you continue it and that we put it on the next agenda, the next meeting, because it's just
So the-
simple.
The information could be obtained
But
for
when
four
would they have to have-
twenty-five.
It has to be,
Legally,
yes,
when would
your
they have to have the information?
Can you get us the information by Monday?
So we need it,
Either way, it's 2 weeks.
we need it today.
No, it's 2 weeks to the next meeting.
In the next 2 days is a little dicey, we'll see. So Monday, Tuesday, does that work?
That's not enough time legally.
Well, we have a meeting on Wednesday, we gotta have a chance to look at it.
Yeah, okay, we'll try.
So the end of the day, Monday, then gives us Tuesday and Wednesday.
But then we're gonna write something up if you wanna get it. I mean, if you want to have that order written,
yeah.
if you did it to the second, it would give them time to get all the information,
Yeah, but
draft
then they
up
don't
an
get
order.
Till a week later.
So, are you okay with
It has to be advertised.
I imagine I am uncomfortable, but I will withdraw.
If we had, if you said the second was open, we could get
Hold
on
on,
the second.
hold on. Will you withdraw your second? Motion and the second was withdrawn.
So it sounds like the second would be a better date
May
for,
2nd.
would be the better date. That gives you
Which
enough time.
means you won't, effectively, you won't get an order till a week after that.
Well, I thought we were using
No,
the,
we
We can, we can,
We'll
we
expedite
can vote
that,
it that
but-
night?
We can vote it that night like we
But
did
that
this
doesn't mean you
evening.
have a whole lot more time to get that information in.
Right.
You still need it, like,
No, we'll get you the information as soon as we can.
okay, so now I need a motion for.
I make a motion to continue this to.
no, they're gonna make a motion.
I-
May
I-
Oh, yeah,
second.
we'll
Motion
make,
to-
they requested it.
I
Okay.
request to
Yeah.
continue the.
Thank you.
At the request of
I'm
the
befuddled
applicant, we are
with my
continuing
cold.
this to May 2nd.
Second.
Okay. Continue to May 2nd. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Unanimous.
Okay. It was a struggle.
That hasn't happened in a while.
Okay.
You're good.
Thank you very
We'll
much.
see you the 2nd.
Good luck.
It only take time
Somebody go
when you're not
summon,
complete.
the girl.
When you're not complete,
Please.
that's when you're
Okay.
I mean,
We're just done.
these guys wanted, you know, I heard them say, we've been planning this a long time. They should have figured this into it. I bet if they came in and talked to Jen, they would have found out exactly what they needed. Hmm?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're stalling for our colleagues.
Boy, do I miss Betsy on those and Mary. They're the shellfish people.
I don't- They bailed because they didn't want to be involved.
Got off easy.
Thank you, Steve.
Mr. Chairman, one
Comment? Right.
Motion should have been to close, not to continue.
Oh.
Just trying to open it to the public.
Jeff,
A little tedious.
is Betsy out there?
Yes, she's coming now.
Okay.
We're gonna open all of these at once, right?
Yes,
There's 4 of them.
yes, yeah.
What?
This group.
All right, next on the agenda, we're going to take
The court was on.
4
I'm gonna put the lights back on.
applications together. But I'm going to read them separately. One of them is out of order. It's a continued request rather than a new request. Jonathan Meigs, 8 Gosnold Road, Woods Hole, Massachusetts, for permission to rebuild storm-damaged wooden stairs and stone seawall to be backfilled with sand and supplemented with native plantings. Priscilla and Victor Clayman, 10 Gosnold Road, Woods Hole, Massachusetts, for permission to rebuild and repair storm-damaged stairs and seawall to be backfilled with sand and supplemented with native plantings. Cornelia and Edward Brown, 20 and 24 Gosnold Road, Woods Hole, Massachusetts, for permission to repair approximately 10 linear feet of storm-damaged seawall. and George Willis, 16 Gosnell Road, Woods Hole, Massachusetts, for permission to repair approximately 70 linear feet of storm-damaged stone riprap along seawall. Hello, Jeff.
Hello, good evening. I'm Jeff Ryder, representing the applicant, being Mike Duffany, for his clients. Here I got the four butter notices here for 8 Gosnell, that's the Meigs, or maybe it's Megs, I'm not sure. There's a misspelling on that, if it matters.
Where's the misspelling?
On the word Meigs, it's M-E-I-G-S.
M-E-I-G-S.
Oh, in the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
The
not the
next
only
is
one.
10 Gosnell, that's the Clayman residence. The Logan residence, which I think you called it the Willis.
Yes, I have, well, 16 is,
It's supposed to be Logan.
Which one?
it's in, under continued, Susan. It's the last one, I believe.
16.
Oh, no, next to
16
last.
Gosnell, it's second continuance.
And that's Logan?
Yes,
Logan.
L-O-G-A-N. And the last one is the Brown residence, 20 and 24 Gosnell.
Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, you have the numbers here, that's so convenient.
I'm going to go through the agenda, just like Chairwoman said. Jonathan Meigs, 8 Gosnell, this is permission to rebuild the storm-damaged wooden stairway. First of all, I want to say that all these are under the emergency repair following the winter storm Riley of 2018. It's March 2nd and 3rd. So that storm tore this shoreline out pretty good, and especially the Logan residents. Also, I'm just going to go through these quick. Number 10, we're asking permission to rebuild the storm-damaged stairway and seawall. 20 and 24. Let me go to 16, I'm sorry. Logan, permission to repair 70 linear feet of storm-damaged riprap seawall. And the last one is 20 and 24. These are on my plans here, by the way. And this is permission to repair 10 linear feet. And there's also, should be repointing on that as well, not just the redone portion. There's 10 feet that's been reworked. You were there today. Anybody saw that? That section's done, but there needs to be some repointing. That's on the 20 and 24. These are the license plans. So we're looking not to expand anything, just rebuild exactly what was there. We have, again, the Meigs, Clayman. Over here, number 16, we have the Logan wall. And then again, the 20 and 24, Gosnell, we have 10 foot of reconstruction plus repointing the face of that wall. So in your packets, you should have 4 separate plans. They all look similar. And this is, again, just going from one from left to right. Again, starting with the Meigs and on back. I didn't mention that each one of these repairs is going to be supplemented with some rework of the top of the bank, restoration of where it was eroded out at the top. Some of these areas were completely torn out, and others were walled out at the top, and that's going to be replaced with native planting. I don't know if you heard me in that last part, but
Excuse my cough.
native plantings, I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's about it. It's sort of short and sweet. We did speak to Jennifer on this right after it happened. She said, try and get started and get it going, because, especially the Logan residents washed completely out and their footings were showing, so. It's well underway now, and should be finished up in a few weeks.
Okay, I believe Jennifer also said that you'd be submitting as-bills, or?
Right, once everything's all built, well, that's like every job of yours.
Yeah.
We're gonna do that. It'll probably be on this type of format, 11 by 17.
Fine. Okay, do we have any questions? Courtney?
No questions.
Maureen?
No questions.
No questions?
I just, were they in pretty good shape before this particular storm?
I'd say 3 of them were.
3 of them were?
Yeah, the Logan one was waiting to fall down. It was, I just remember I licensed these walls back in the 90s, and I do recall that one being kind of hollow in the back then, but it looked structurally fine, but it wasn't.
I'll second. Peter?
No questions.
No questions.
All right.
I do have one question,
All right,
sorry.
Maureen,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
Where the Rosa Rugosa was, where that was on the plan, are you gonna be planting anything on the top again?
Yes.
Okay.
That was one thing that I was trying to get across there. Yes.
Okay. That's it.
In the narrative on each one, it says, tidied up the top with native planting.
Plants,
Once
okay,
they
yeah, once you get all
fill the
done.
Back,
Yeah.
backfill.
And it will be in the same configuration that's on all the plans, pretty much?
Well, pretty much, I can't say for sure. A lot of things have happened probably in 20 years. Unfortunately, I thought the best thing to do in this situation was to get you what we had on file, which was the license plans, and then recorded at the registry.
Right, I think that makes it easy, because then you have what was already there.
Yeah.
You just kind of follow what
Yeah.
was on the
Yeah,
recorded
that's
What we
plan.
want.
And Jen agreed, so.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
It's fine, it's good. Mark?
Just for the record, I mean, Jeff already said this was under the emergency declaration by DEP, and part of the requirements were, you really want to get this done quickly, because that area was really damaged, and it would be more damage if it wasn't done. So that's why, like Jeff said, he submitted the license plans, and in order to do it this way, the idea was you had to submit, or, that there was an emergency by April 2nd, which they did, and then the work had to be completed by May 2nd, which, it will be done. So, they've met those conditions of the terms, and like you said, once they do the as-built, then that's what's there.
So I'll make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
All hearings, all 4 hearings.
All right.
All right, motion and a second. Any more questions or comments from the board? Anything else from the public? Applicant? No? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, so moved.
Great, thank you.
Nice
Thank
to
you,
see you,
Jeff.
Jeff.
No, not the water. Thank you. Now, moving along, this is another name with an error. William and Paul should be Solomine, S-O-L, is it I-M-I-N-E? Salamini, excuse me. Lot 110, Cape Codder Road, map 36-09-001-110, Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to construct a 5-bedroom, single-family dwelling with attached garage, porch, install a crushed stone driveway, swimming pool with stone patio, retaining wall, new Title V sewage disposal system, native mitigation plantings, and the associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Courtney.
just a correction. The applicant's name is Solimine, S-O-L-I-M-I-N-E.
Thank you.
Just make sure Susan gets it.
Got it.
Thank you.
Sorry, right ahead.
Thank you. My name is Tom Bunker with BSS Design. A plan for this property was filed August of last year. And that plan showed only fill to raise part of the land above the flood zone. And there was no house proposed on the plan at that time. Comment from one, we were just showing one of the commissioners, we were just showing chapter 1 of our 2-chapter book.
Right.
We want to see both chapters. At the time of that hearing, I got the impression that the issue with filling a coastal flood zone, coastal A flood zone was not such an issue, but the issue is more of flooding from or rainfall onto the property. Flooding coming down Cape Cod Road and pooling in this area and onto the lot. There's a low area that comes onto the lot, and on that plan we proposed to fill right up to the property line where all of the storage volume was gone. There's still storage volume in the roadway itself. So I think that was the main concern regarding flooding. I can go over briefly. I'll repeat one salient point. I don't know if we can include in this some of the testimony and an exhibit from the August hearing. We talked about the flood zone. I don't want to go into it that much at this time. But at that previous hearing, there were 839 cubic yards of fill to go into this area to fill it up to be above the flood zone. And a calculation which I gave to you is that volume would, assuming that the water coming up into Buzzards Bay, some of that would flow into this little embayment, and after the fill is put in, there'll be 839 cubic yards less volume for the water to flow into, which presumably that water would stay in Buzzards Bay. That volume of lost fill could potentially raise the elevation of the floodwater in Buzzards Bay by 2/10,000ths of an inch. And I'll just jump ahead briefly and say that before I get to show you, but the fill that we're proposing now in this area is half that volume. It's a little more than half that volume, 444 cubic yards. And so by the same calculation, I would expect that if this type of calculation were to hold true, that it would raise the water level of Buzzards Bay by 1/10,000th of an inch rather than 2/10,000ths of an inch. So I think it's minimal, the effect on the coastal storm flood area. And because there are no structures in this flood zone right now. The flood zone has a narrow opening where the water would come in from Buzzards Bay here, and then the flood zone, there's a basin here, and there are no structures or other property that could be damaged, because the proposed fill is at the back edge of this. This fill will not be diverting water somewhere else to a different structure that could cause damage. The vacant lot is the same as it was, except before there was a cherry tree right here that is blown over in one of the winter storms. Cape Cod Road comes down the hill, basically ends in a driveway to this house. There's a lawn area, which these two lots, at the time for 50 years, are owned by the same man, Albert Fine, or Phil Fine rather. And he maintained a lawn on across both lots and across this portion of Cape Cod Road. And it'll be brought up that there is a way right here which goes toward Buzzards Bay, toward the ocean. And this, as I mentioned, there's a very pretty low area right here. There is one contour that where I calculated right here, the elevation 10.7, which is the highest this could fill before overtopping and flowing onto the next property, and presumably it could flow down toward Buzzards Bay. But this contour right here is the furthest that can fill before overtopping. The flood zone does come to this line right here, and there's a narrow band of what could be considered coastal bank right here by slope, and some here that goes onto the next property, which is steeper than 10 to 1. This coastal bank is more than 100 feet.
Thank you.
More than 100 feet from any other resource area, and thus it has no A zone associated with it. It does have a B zone that covers the rest of the lot out onto the abutting lots. There's, well, it's in Cape Cod Road, but there's a large ash tree here, which is to be preserved. Otherwise, there's a lot of bamboo here, which will be removed as best possible, and native, mostly native trees within vines and honeysuckle and whatever on the remainder of the lot. Lawn and a house here, up here, and a house on this lot. As I said, the abutting lot is, the lower part of the abutting lot has no structures on it except for a play set. So on this plan, the previous plan, we had the fill going right up to the street line. On this plan, there's no fill until we get to here. So that 10.7 contour is right through here. So this is the area that would be the maximum extent of the flood water would go to this line right here. And there's no fill within that area, except a very small amount right up here in Cape Cod Road that does go across that 10.7. So I think that, as I said, in the neighborhood of about 45 square feet. About 45 square feet of that storage volume would be lost. And I do show a little bit of regrading here, scooping that out to reclaim that lost volume from the construction of this turnaround of the driveway. So this area here will remain. There will be fill in the flood zone to build the driveway. And then we have the first of the retaining walls. So this wall here comes from about elevation 12 up to 15 and a half. So this wall will have the effect of holding back the fill that will get this house site out of the flood zone. And then there is another wall, just so we raise up another 2 feet. So this platform for the house is at elevation 17 and a half, and the house floor would be at 19 and a half here, and the driveway would come up from this elevation here around 13, and then it would come up to 17 and a half up in this location, and it'd be a turnaround here. So this corner is held up by these 2 retaining walls, and then they do want to put a pool in, so then we have a 2-foot-high retaining wall at this point across here, so it'll go from elevation 17 and a half to elevation 19 and a half for the pool, and then that pool coping would slope away, so the back, this vegetated area would be down at elevation 19, And then that's the base of this wall. The lower wall here is just a seating wall at, is it 1.6 feet, about 20 inches high along here. There's a low seating wall and some planting, and then this other wall, which will vary from at elevation 21 here, which is basically the same height as the seating wall, up to 23, and anything up in this corner gets up to 20, the wall will be up to 25, and here the lot slopes up to 26, and in one point up here, 27. So overall, from 19 to 25, between two walls, there's about 6 feet of retaining wall here. And this wall will come along and hold back. This driveway will be cut. And actually, so this area here for the pool is a little bit of excavation. But then this area here obviously is being filled to get it out of the flood zone. There are 3 drainage systems, one here. Each one will consist of 2,000-gallon tanks excavated down to be on top of the sand layer, which is about 8.5 feet down, and then with some risers to come up to near grade. So we have the first pair of these back here by the pool. This would be for the pool drawdown, runoff from the pool patio, the drainage, the drainage that goes in the backside of the retaining wall, as shown in the detail, is a drain pipe. That will drain out into here so that there won't be any water leaving this area. A pair of these pits here under the driveway, which will, all of the downspouts here will feed into those. And then the driveway itself will be allowed to flow down. But down in this location, we have another pair of these pits here, and each of these pairs is a little bit oversized for the calculation of a 25-year storm. They're a little bit oversized for the amount of water that will be coming from these 3 different areas into those leaching pits. The septic system leaching is down here below the retaining wall. It will be in the flood zone, which is allowed. It's not a velocity zone, but it's above the area of the land that could fill up during a heavy rainstorm up to this 10.7. So the septic system is, the ground above the septic system will be above that 10.7. So it will not be prone to flooding. We are not, there's no A zone here. The lot is somewhat naturally vegetated in the back. Trees will be removed. All of the disturbed areas above the walls and here, and plus 1,500, this is about 1,000 square feet here at the top of the wall. 1,500 square feet here and here of native plants, and 3 native trees planted here, and of course the ash tree will stay also. I feel that putting native plants down here into this low area will be more beneficial down here than than planted further away. And as I mentioned, the 444 cubic yards here will not affect the flood, the coastal flood zone. These 2 pits, all of the runoff from the development will be accommodated in these 3 pairs of pits. And so there'll be no added runoff from this development into this low area. And so any water that comes in here, filling it up, will do what it does at the moment. And if there's more water coming down, as in a big storm would happen now, then it'll fill that up and go into this leaching area here. It would spill over, but no more would spill over than what happens now. That is the plan. I'll take your questions.
Thanks, Tom. Mark, did you have anything you wanted to say?
No comments, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Steve, you want to start off? Questions?
Yeah, thank you. But my question is the right-of-way, and it's probably not pertinent to the site development, so I don't have any other questions.
The right-of-way toward the beach?
The Cape Cod. no.
Cape Cod or?
Right, there's an ash tree in the middle of the road, the right-of-way?
Yes.
Right.
And that we're leaving.
Right.
Okay.
Just confused that there's
Okay.
a tree in the middle of the right-of-way.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
My question is, with the seepage pits under the driveway, how would they be maintained? Is there a grading in the proposed driveway, or do you have
There is
to
not
tear up
the-
the driveway, or what?
In the covers will be raised to, well, have a note for the covers that are raised near grade. We could put them at least one of them at grade to open and maintain.
Okay, well, I don't know what the typical opening would be to maintain them. I've seen drainage pits, sometimes they require some type of a backhoe or some type of shovel, and they have to have access to dig out things that
On
washed
the
in.
road catch basins, when they
Yeah.
dig out all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, these are not taking surface runoff. These are taking the roof runoff from the gutters and downspouts. So there shouldn't be a lot of that, but there could be the seeds and leaves and things.
And they will be accessible or not after it's constructed?
Yes, they will be, as is required of septic systems, a riser brought to, I think you say within 12 inches of grade, so it could, for a gravel surface, so let's say if it's going to be paved or anything like, a hard surface, then, we'd require that it be brought up with a cast iron cover. But as a gravel crushed stone surface, we're just keeping them just below grade.
Okay, thank you.
What's up? Kevin?
Also.
All right, Jamie? Betsy?
I'm not all set. So, you talked about coastal flooding.
Yes.
I didn't have a problem last time, I still don't have a problem. I do have a problem with stormwater runoff, though. And I have it for a couple of reasons. One is, and I must admit, I didn't go out to the site again today, since I've been out to the site 3 times in the last couple of months. But my impression is that where it says lot 110, kind of in the middle,
Right there. Yep.
21,125 square feet,
Yep.
that if excess water got there, it would drain off to the right, to the lot to the right.
There's actually a little bit of a berm, but it will eventually. There's, right through this area here, we did some more survey, right in this area, and there is a point where it will run off, and that's what I
Where it's
figured
gonna
was
tip over.
elevation 10.7.
Okay, and here's my problem with, here's what I'm grappling with. I recognize that you've probably done the calculations. We've already gone through calculations, discussing calculations. You've done calculations for the runoff for a 25-year storm. But, having said that, you're taking a bunch of woods away from this area. And part of the function, as you well know, of vegetation is to... Transpiration, right. So a lot of the water in the soil here, upstream of a potential area where you could have overtopping, is you're taking away whatever that volume, I mean, we calculate the average transpiration. But what it means is that runoff from the sides here that come to here, there's gonna be more runoff now, more runoff once this is built than now exists.
I disagree that the soil, as you know, is fairly dense. I think there's a lot of runoff now, and I know that the roots, over time, the roots.
Well, the roots and whatever the vegetation is between the trees
they
slows stuff down.
They hold stuff down, but they will also, the roots will take up the water, not as quickly as it falls, but as the water soaks into the soil, the roots will take up that water. So for future runoff or something, like, within this area here, for the pool, I mean, that's contained. There's no runoff from that. It's up, as I said, it slopes toward the back.
But there's runoff from, I mean, if there were no houses here at all, there'd be runoff from the slope. So some of that natural runoff from the slope goes through this piece of property.
Well, if any comes over this wall and gets into this area right here, then it's not going any further. But also, yes.
So you're creating something where you could have a major storm and it's gonna fill up your swimming pool?
I hope the pool is full already.
Yeah, but.
Well, it could, if there was a really major storm, it could fill that up. The back here is 19 and the wall is 19 and a half.
I can tell you, I was at a marine lab for years in the Caribbean that had a swimming pool, and there was an advantage for the swimming pool because kids could come in from their dive and jump into the pool and didn't have to take a shower. That's how they could get dry. That pool was down in a basin. When we had a major storm, that whole basin would fill, and then that whole pool had to be drained and cleaned before it could be used again. So is that the kind of situation we're gonna have here?
Well, we have this, I mean, there's water is gonna be, the water that falls within there, not within, on the patio, that's gonna go and it's gonna overflow and go into
those dry wells.
Those dry wells.
Right. But I'm
And
talking about upstream of that.
what's it, you say you are or aren't?
M.
Water coming from upstream.
Right.
So from this
Uphill.
little bit here. Yeah. So if it gets there, this wall is backfilled with coarse, well-drained material, and the water can drop down below that wall, through that material, through that fill material, into that pipe trench, which is draining the backside of that retaining wall, and then go into those.
2 inches in an hour storm?
This, for what falls in that area, it's calculated that, yes. It starts off with, those two are 2,000 gallons of just free space.
Well, let me go on to my next question.
Yeah, but also I could say that, might be, the trees will, but also, when you say it won't take in 2 inches an hour, but neither will the trees transpire 2 inches per hour.
No, I recognize that, but they would keep any soil
Yes, and this is
drier.
gonna be, yes, and this is gonna be replanted here. Plus, we're replanting down here, so in this low area, where there's only lawn now, we'll have shrubs, which will add more transpiration.
Yeah, I'm not as worried about your lot as the effect it might have on neighbors.
Mhm.
So let me go to my next question, and then I'll let Maury or Courtney pick up where I left off if you want to. But my next question is, so this isn't mitigation planning, this is voluntary planting within buffer.
It's for
Or-
the trees and other vegetation that was removed. It's not mitigation in the sense of 2-to-1 mitigation for an increase in coverage.
is it trees and vegetation to be removed within an A zone?
No.
Okay. Are you calculating, so this is kind of the trade-off for the number of trees that you're removing within the B zone of the buffer?
Yes.
And can you tell me how many trees and what the count per inch is?
I didn't add them up. They're shown on the plan. I could go back and look and assess all their health and vitality also.
Excuse me.
Well, I can assure you, Tom, I'm neither gonna add up what's on the plan, nor am I gonna go out and assess the health and vitality, but I would like to have that information. I'm done, thank you.
All right, Mouling.
Couple questions, Tom. Where you have the swimming pool in the wall where it says, your spot elevation at 21, right at the, it would be on the west side, I'm sorry, the east side.
East side,
East side. The wall doesn't connect there. So is that just gonna sheet off through that? It's gonna be like a little,
No, I mean, I could put the wall I mean, that's where the wall changes from a fill to a cut situation, but you could put a wall through there just to make sure water stays.
well, just so it
There's no
stays on your lot,
What's that?
just so it stays on
Yes,
that lot.
yes, we could do that. I mean, it was broken because there is no retaining either way at that point, but that could be
The next
put through and
question,
connected.
what would you have called Monday's rain event? Like, what'd you say?
Very short downpour. We had
Okay.
0.93 inches at our house.
Okay, and what are these,
About
what are
15 minutes.
these, designed for?
2.5 inches in 1 hour.
Okay, well, that little downpour the other day, as little as it may have seemed, I watched copious amounts of totally vegetated areas that had lawn, that it pounded the soil right out of the grass and washed it away.
Oh, it was definitely
So-
heavy, huh?
So I guess my concern here is not so much, again, as Betsy said, for this lot, it's for the other lots, and when it sheets off, and when it rains like that, nothing goes in a gutter. I don't know if anybody has ever watched it, but it
It just
shoots
pours
right off
right
the
off.
roof and it blows away onto the ground. So for a regular, nice, soft, gentle rain, yes, downspouts and gutters work wonderful. Anything after that, they do not hold the volume or the velocity, and it overwashes it. So that's a lot of water that is gonna be impervious. So I just wanna make sure that you've designed this so that your water does not sheet off anywhere and cause problems.
Well, aside
this
from,
lot.
if you're saying that, if there's a different kind of gutter, then we'll allow it to go over, but, I mean, if the water did go into gutters, this would be enough for, the 25%.
For a nice soft rain, not like yesterday's downpour, and Monday's downpour.
I think gutters can be installed, I mean, different kinds of gutters can be installed in different ways, so they will or won't take the water, but.
I don't think any
Well,
gutters, I
I've
don't think
been,
any
I've been
gutters
out in the
held
field
that.
a long time, Tom, and I can tell you, there aren't many, I've never seen one yet. If you find it,
Yeah.
you tell me, because I will put it on people's houses. Because it's a perennial problem for everybody, every builder, every homeowner. Gutters are a problem. On paper, it looks wonderful, you're capturing it all, and it's going in these,
Yeah.
catch basins, but it's not really how it works in real world.
Yeah, the drainage, so the lower pits here are intended, so the rim will be raised above grade to, so a light little bit of rain will just sit in the puddle there and not go in, so
Yeah.
the sediments
Well, yeah,
will
perfect.
settle. The entire driveway surface is calculated going to there, so, and I was toying with putting a trench drain across the driveway, right where where that wall is. And I could put a trench drain there and tie it back into this,
That was my next,
and that
the
would,
driveway,
whatever misses the gutters will go on the ground, and
into that.
it
then-
is all all these walls would be a little bit above the lawn level, so no water is gonna leave the lawn.
They might be in a bathtub by the end of it.
Well,
Okay.
it can go down the driveway. I mean, it's,
Okay. All right, that, and then the calculations for the trees, because I think by looking at this plan, there isn't one tree left, is there?
no, probably not.
Okay.
All set?
Yeah, thank you.
Courtney?
I want to reinforce what Maury said. I live about maybe a half a mile as a crow flies from this site. And your 0.9 inches of rain came in about 10 minutes.
Oh, I know, it was fast. It was fast
I-
here too.
The visibility was equivalent to a blizzard in the wintertime.
Yeah, it was amazing.
And I have a stone driveway like you're proposing, and that was a sheet of water. And I had just had it graded, and it got ungraded. And I watched lawn that had been established for 4 or 5 years disappear. And this wasn't the only storm we've had this winter. Since the fall, I've had a bunch of them like that. And when it rains like that in my house, it rains like that on this site. And I worry about where this water is gonna go. And I think you've done a lot of work to build retaining walls. But if I were water and I was running and it was coming down in sheets, I'd be on other people's property. And that's a real concern.
Depending on which part.
No,
on here.
I mean, you know, the top of you said that I'm looking at this upper retaining wall above the pool.
Yeah.
And you say it varies 21 to 25. Because I don't have a cross-section that, other than typical. So is that retaining wall above the finished grade? Behind it and uphill?
It is slightly above it.
So it's designed that the water will not go over, but it will go around. That's the way it looks on the plan. So you've got about 2 feet on either side to the adjacent property. So what's gonna happen to the water?
Well, on this side, the property is higher.
If I were a neighbor,
It's
I'd be
not-
grumpy.
It's not gonna go uphill to this property here.
No, we all know that water flows downhill.
And then the other question is,
Talk about the science
I mean, and following up, you know,
Like our
the
calculations.
bottom of this hill where you're putting your septic system is the low spot in the lot.
It's the low spot, but it's not where it would be
And,
flooded.
and is that gonna impact your leach field?
No, if you were listening, I said it's above the flood level.
I mean,
There is a natural point here where the water will leave this lot, and the septic system is above.
No, I know, Tom, you've tried to incorporate in the concerns of this commission from a previous iteration of this. And, you know, when I looked at this site originally, I said, why don't you build a house way up the hill? Well, you moved it up the hill, but you put a swimming pool in between where I would have dropped the house. So it's that, I mean, if you'd put the house where the swimming pool is and put the swimming pool somewhere else or eliminated it, you'd, for one thing, you'd be almost outside of the flood zone and you'd be in a different situation. But anyway, those are my concerns. And you need to address that to our satisfaction.
Tom, on your wall, the Versalock wall section, you're showing turf right to the top of the wall. Where, I thought you said it was gonna be a
No,
little.
That's it will be planted, that's a tip, that's, around the house it's turf.
So this is where the swimming pool fence is. Does that go around the whole property?
That's not necessarily, that's where if the wall gets over 4 feet high, well, if it's required, it does have to go around the pool, yes. And any other places where by code it might be, or for safety standards, it might be required to have a fence along the top of the wall, which would be along the high sides of the property.
Thank you.
One other thing, you mentioned you were gonna put a trench drain across a driveway to catch water running down?
I could do that.
I mean, that strikes me as sort of useless unless you've got a huge design there, because the water will go down that driveway like.
Well, right here, where the driveway is pretty flat before it starts going downhill.
Okay.
Capture all, this is in response to the water, overflowing the gutters, so any water that flows into here, not caught in the gutters, will end up eventually here, and it's pretty flat still, and if I had a trench drain right across here at the end of that wall.
No, and I appreciate that. I think it's gonna be a constant maintenance headache, because that will just filled up with silt, with all the fines from the dense grade or whatever you're using on your driveway. And, and then all of a sudden it's useless. No, there's a lot of challenges here, and I think you gotta address them a little better.
Go ahead. Tom, why can't you save that 30-inch oak that's on the west property line? You have a wall right on top of it. I know is that because of the driveway back up?
That's the
South one.
driveway, yeah. It's in a few feet of cut, and it wouldn't be able to get the car out of the garage.
Thank you.
What would you like to do?
Well, I guess I have some fine tuning to do.
Okay,
We'll have to get a continuance.
all right. Can you, Mark, can you tell us what's available?
How long you looking for, Tom, to get the work done?
Well, I would need at least a week, so it has to be for at least 2 weeks. I don't know if you have an open day.
Because we don't have a hearing on the 9th. So then the next would be the 16th of May.
If that's the best we can do, then that's,
All right, at the request of the applicant, I make a motion to continue this hearing till May 6th, May?
Yeah,
May
I'll
16th.
leave it.
it'll be warm, Beth.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Anything else from the board at this time?
I think Courtney said.
Anything from the public? Yes, sir, please come up.
So my name's Mitch Sogan. I live on the lot that is here. And I just wanted to point out a few things that concern me about the project, Tom. One, it's not just the drainage down Cape Cotter Road, but the entire southern half of the Beckles Road development drains down into this area. And this lot, this week, is about 12 feet above sea level, as is this part back here. And what I'm concerned about is I don't have a good sense about the height and the size of this retaining wall that's going in, and the notion that water that comes into this area when we have a storm like we did on Monday, that water is going to reflect off of that retaining wall, as opposed to what he's currently doing, which is sharing the perking of the deposition, whatever you want to call it, of the water that comes out of the Beckles Road area and is drained between these two lots. The second thing
Sir, I'm sorry, could you speak into the microphone?
Yeah,
You're welcome to take it out of there if you like.
So I'm concerned about the height of that retaining wall, and I don't have a sense about that. The second thing that I didn't realize until your presentation is that there's a potential for a lot of water to come around either side. And what I'm really worried about now is whether or not that water is going to be diverted into where there still is pitch on the hill, but that comes into our property, and that's just going to add to, I'm worried about more drainage into an area that'll collect. So I'm beginning to wonder if we need to be thinking about some kind of mitigation effect, if that's possible. I will tell you, I was in our house, which is about where my finger is, on Monday during this rainstorm, and both this lot and this lot completely filled with water. They became lakes. Now, they drained out quickly, but they became lakes. And so this kind of calculation that just comes down from Cape Cod Road, I think is not sufficient. I'm worried that by building this house up so close to where things are really flat and low, that we're going to have bad drainage problems and make it rendering the rest of our property unusable, turn it into a swamp. So that's my concern.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Peg Brandon, and I'm an abutter to this project as well. I live right here on the Spindrift Hill side of things. And I really wanted to follow on Mitch because it's the same kind of topic. I can appreciate the effort to capture the, with the loss of the trees, significant loss of the trees, and so on, that really we've designed, or he's designed, several buckets to contain the water on this property and perhaps to mitigate that with the drainage things. But the new bucket that's also created is this one right here, where there's an existing wall and a significant increase in elevation between that property and this one. So there is a stone wall right here that's holding back my entire property. And so when the water now does what it does, it has nowhere to go because the edge of this bucket is in the way. I don't see how it can get past the cliff here, and I'm not sure that there's actually enough space to get over to Mitch's house or what that's going to be. So I think we're going to have a big, deep, spongy bog or something right there. And we've had not just the last Monday's storm, but the fourth of our big storms a few weeks ago was a major impact for this whole region. This is draining not just Beckles and Cape Cod, but also Spindrift, so that there's a lot of water going there. So I have great concern about this newly created bucket here, which has no drainage in this proposal. So, thanks.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thanks for having me. I'm Alex Bejan. I'm at lot, I'm right here at this property. And I have a few points that I've noticed in this rendition of this engineering report I'd like to go over. A lot of the stuff I agree with many of your comments on the situation. First thing, I welcome all of you to come down to the property and take a look at it. It'll really give you a good idea of the topography of the land. And I've been here for almost 10 years now, and the water does flow down Cape Cod Road. It goes to the bottom, and it kind of pools around that area there. And it's usually when I walk through that area, it's very soggy, and you can feel, your feet giving way. I wrote a letter. I don't know if many of you got it. Did you get a chance to look it over and everything? Just want to reiterate a few things on that, obviously the house is enclosed in this 270-degree retaining wall, which, I don't know, it's set right in. And my first assumption is it's there to prevent the water from coming in. And then in order to prevent the water from coming in, when the rain comes down, they came up with these water reservoirs to catch the rainwater, and the water is gonna go somewhere. So, you know, it's gonna catch in here, it may drain out here, and, you know, nice regard to the engineer who's very knowledgeable, but there's a lot of assumptions made that the water's gonna catch here, and the water's not gonna come here and not go there. Reality, water's gonna travel, and it's gonna go from high to low. It's gonna travel in all these different areas and go into the low spots. So, one thing is, he has an intent to build a 5-bedroom home on this lot, which is a monster home in a small lot. And if you look carefully, you don't even have enough room to travel on the northern border, only got 4 feet to come around. So the septic system is enormous for a 5-bedroom home like this. So I think that's something that should be regarded, or made note of. The other thing is they did a lot of, another thing I noticed is they did a lot of soil samples. And they said that they went down like, I think it was 9 feet, I don't know, correct me, before they hit groundwater. So a lot of these measurements that they're taking where the water is, I really have doubts to that on the perk testing, on the water level. So I'm very skeptical about some of the results on that. And I think maybe that should be taken again. We could get a really good idea of the water in that area. The other thing too is they talk about grading. This is very interesting. I want to read this. I don't know if you got a chance to read this about the leaching field. Let me just read this to you, just for those who haven't read this or whatever. The location of the septic system and leaching field. According to the Department of Environmental Protection, under section 15.21, no septic tank, composing toilet shall be constructed in a velocity zone on a coastal beach, barrier beach, or dune in a regulatory floodway. And this area is considered a regulatory floodway. And the floodway, according to NEMA, should be about 15 feet. So, according to the map on the other side, the zone, it came like this. The flood, it came down like this and up. So the leaching field and half the house is situated right on the coastal floodway of 15 feet. And this is residing at 10 feet. So in order for him to build a septic system, we have to raise that up 5 feet with soil. And that means the water's gonna have to be displaced somewhere. When you change the topography of that, by raising it, the water's gonna flow. So those are all things that we really have to consider. Lastly, I just want to say that this area has always had poor drainage. If it was buildable, the Fine family would have built a house there years ago. I'll be very upset if I start seeing water flowing into my property. Lastly, this land should remain as a non-buildable conservation land. There are several ways the land can be purchased and donated to the town of Falmouth. Several neighbors are willing to keep this land in its natural state. If the land can't be built on, I'm sure arrangements can be made to purchase the land from the owner without a loss of income. As a vital member of a community, it's the Conservation Commission's job to maintain and preserve our local habitat and ecosystem. And hopefully they will continue on this mission. And with that, I close.
Thank you. Anyone else? Betsy?
You know what would be helpful for me, and I know it was, you had something like this in the first submission. So maybe we ought to make that first one a part of this record. Okay? But what I would like, when we come back, is a better sense of the topography around here. To either side, and then up, you know, what's the watershed, kind of like that around it.
If I may, I'd just like to address one misconception.
Sure.
This is not a regulatory floodway, it's a flood zone. The difference The other thing is the perk tests were witnessed by the town health agent. They are correct. That's where the sand layer and the water table are. So we don't need to do any more testing on that.
Thank you.
So
We
there's a
ready
motion
for a
and a
vote?
second on the
Yes,
table.
there is.
Yeah.
Okay, we're ready for a vote.
Great.
All those in favor of continuing this hearing to May 16, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Thank you, everyone. All right, now we go to continued request for a hearing under a notice of intent. Arlene Schubert, 23 Ormond Drive, East Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to remove existing concrete patio, construct small addition, construct new deck, remove existing leaching pit, and install a new Title V sewage disposal system, stockade fence, native mitigation plantings, and the associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping. Good evening.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, my name is George Collins. I'm a registered professional engineer from Collins Civil Engineering Group. I'm representing Arlene Schubert for a notice of intent. The project has been issued a DEP file number, SE 25-4352. This property is located on the southern end of Seacoast Shores. And the entire property is in a flood zone AE. There's also, let's see here, along the west, off-site to the west, there's a salt marsh. There's also a bordering vegetative wetland here. And then the nearest resource area is the blue line, which is a coastal bank. The 50-foot buffer zone associated with the coastal bank is shown in orange, and the 100-foot jurisdiction associated with the coastal bank is shown in pink. So the entire property is within the 100-foot jurisdiction of the coastal bank, in addition to completely within the flood zone. This house, Arlene is renovating this house, and we went out and did percolation tests, and we are proposing a septic system in this area right here. And basically, in order to meet the minimum setbacks of the property line, it's as far away from the coastal bank that we can get the septic system. There are a couple of trees that have to be taken down. Those are shown in the black X's right here, here, and here. There's 3 trees that have to come down as for part of the project. So that's one thing that's being proposed. And then up in, actually, currently, there's a deck on the westerly side of the property, of the house, an existing deck. That deck's going to be taken down. There's also a set of some stairs, and there's also a set of steps in the front that are also going to be removed. And then we're proposing a deck that wraps around the west side and the southerly side of the house. And then we're doing a little porch bump out in the front. What I did is I did a Zone A, Zone B analysis on the total amount of structures that were being introduced into that area. Each of the different items that are being added and subtracted are all shown on the plan. And then there's a summary over here that basically identifies the amount of increased structures within the Zone A. And then basically, within the Zone B, there's a little bump out that's being introduced, but there's also patio being removed, essentially resulting in no increase in structure in the Zone B. So what I've proposed is a 3-to-1 mitigation area, shown in green on the on the plan, effectively attempting to meet the 3-to-1 ratio performance standard. I did talk to Jennifer about, what types of plants should we put in there, and she indicated that that's something that she could spec out based off of her site visit. The other thing that we're proposing is a fence along the rear of the property. We also have erosion control proposed, starting at the street here, runs along the southerly lot line, and then the westerly lot line, and then along the southerly lot line, and that'll help prevent any type of off-site siltation. I'm thinking the most evasive thing that's going to be going on here will be installing the plantings. So I'm confident that that the erosion control will basically be effective in capturing anything that might try to move off-site. At this point, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that the commission or public may have.
Thank you very much.
Excuse me.
Jamie?
I don't have anything yet.
All right, Kevin?
I guess my only question would involve some of your math. This one plan with a signature dated 4/4 looks like you cheated yourself. Maybe I should keep quiet.
Okay.
As near as I can figure out, 846 and 55 is 901, and 305 and 24 is 328, and that should give you 5 something, right?
Okay, so
And you've got 6 something.
673. Okay, so I might be able to trim some of the mitigation back.
If you felt like it, to be honest with you, having been out the site, I have no idea what the real extent of these decks and cement patios are. It was kind of tough to tell what was what.
We did stake out the mitigation area. We staked out the corners of the proposed deck, and the top of bank is staked out. The 50-foot buffer is staked out. So there are a lot of stakes out there. So, but based off of what you're saying, our intent is to meet the 3-to-1 mitigation ratio. And what we could do is demonstrate that on the ultimately demonstrate that on the as-built, that we achieve that 3-to-1 mitigation ratio.
Sure. No demerits for going over that either. You all set, Kevin?
Yes.
Thank you. Peter?
Did Mark have any comments relayed by Jen or?
Well, one of the main reason it was originally continued was because, the resource areas weren't, quite right, so they handled that beautifully. The setbacks for Zone A, Zone B, and then reflecting in, the amount of mitigation plantings based in, in that area. Is all the area you're talking about building in within Zone A of one of these?
Yes, yep, all the increased structures is exclusively in the Zone A. The Zone B, we're removing some and adding some, and it's essentially a wash.
Yeah, and then, you know, like you were saying, some of the trees that need to be removed, typically, you know, you replace those, but there already are plenty of trees there, and it wouldn't be a factor in this situation.
Yeah, and the tree right here is actually substantially damaged by storm damage. Is a main portion of the tree is taken off, and the two other trees are basically within. They're outside the 50, but they need to be removed for the overdig for the septic system.
Yeah, I spoke to Jen about the trees. She feels, and I agree with her, that in this case, it doesn't really make sense to try to replace the trees. They probably wouldn't grow. They wouldn't have any light to grow. So some of the other commissioners may feel differently. We'll find out about that.
Okay, I'm all set.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Steve?
Thank you. No, I was just appreciated that you didn't try to do more on this. It's a 10,000 square foot lot, and the marsh and the wetlands are almost in the lot. And I think this is what we should look for when we're redoing a house within a sensitive area, not a whole lot of extra house.
Yeah. To give credit to where it's due, I met with your staff a couple times, and they nudged me along, so.
Oh, good.
That's all I got. Thank
Glad
you.
you were amenable. That's good. Thanks. Courtney?
No questions.
Maury?
I'm thinking still.
Okay.
The tree thing is only because we don't even have the species, the size, or the, you know, on that he's gonna take down. Usually we like to know what, just so we know what's there and what I mean, we know what's there. We went out and looked at it, but if it's on.
Yeah, I believe there's, these are like 12-inch hardwoods, and that is a 15-inch hardwood. I apologize. I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
I don't know the types.
They're oaks.
But they're hardwood oaks, presumably.
I do like how you put the mitigation and didn't count it under the circle, under the canopy of the tree.
Again, I have to give your staff credit. They're the ones that
We're gaining on that.
guided me in that direction.
I'll bring that up.
Sure.
Betsy? Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Betsy?
So,
I'm measuring.
well, here's the problem. So we don't allow it to go closer to the most critical A zone, the furthest A zone. So, this is closer to the salt marsh. Your addition is closer to the salt marsh than your existing deck,
The existing deck is actually closer than the proposed deck.
to the salt marsh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, unless
Uh,
Maury
there's a
colored
little-
the
if you-
salt marsh line,
This is salt marsh. This is that one.
so that's salt marsh, and that's salt marsh. This is your 100-foot to the salt marsh?
100 foot is, yeah, and see, this is the edge of the existing deck right
Right.
here, and then this is.
Oh, so you're saying that's
a
the
couple
edge?
feet. That's the proposed edge, that's the existing edge, so the proposed deck was
No closer than
then.
that corner?
Right.
All right. So if we're not replacing trees that are taken down, then another part of the mitigation is that you replace one tree for every 1,000 feet of mitigation planning. Did you happen to catch that little part?
No.
No. It's a hidden spot, but the people who come all the time know that.
I mean, if there was a place to put a tree on the site, yeah, I'm sure the applicant wouldn't have a problem doing that as a condition, but there's,
Well, we'll discuss it.
okay, yeah, if we feel, if you think there's a place where we can put a tree,
You'll put a tree.
Yeah, we can ask
Perfect.
Jen to reconsider
My
that
yard.
when she
It's not,
Just-
that's not on their property.
just in general, I think, we're introducing food and shelter source, that's not there, I've
No, I'm just saying,
I've
but
been working in a lot of towns, and this is a very aggressive, I'm normal standards in other towns, but I understand you have.
Are you saying we're an aggressive board? We
No,
were
our
just told that we're
regulations.
not. Oh, our regulations. Our regulations, we
Board's
tried
not
to,
aggressive,
we tried to treat every applicant the same. So every applicant has to deal with the same regulation. So we'll discuss that.
Yeah, it may be a condition. No. All right,
Make a motion, to close the hearing, take it under advisement.
Second.
all right. Anything else from the board?
Good, thank you.
So I can see you're anxious to come back before us again.
It's late.
I know.
Yeah.
Anything from the public? No. All right, all those in favor, say aye. Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Thank you.
So, excuse my ignorance, but you'll take it under advisement and then.
That's right.
You'll vote on it.
Yes,
Essentially-
next week.
essentially,
And then,
Within,
Appreciate it.
within
Yeah.
7 days.
Thank you, good job.
Thank you, appreciate it.
thank you. All right. George Logan, we have done that one with the neighboring properties. Stephen and Ann Sherman, 28 Nichols Road, East Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to construct an addition, install a new Title V sewage disposal system, remove the existing shed, retaining wall, trees, install new retaining walls, native trees, and mitigation plantings, and the associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping. Hello, Matt.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. For the record, Matt Costa, Cape and Islands Engineering, representing the applicant. We continued this from last hearing so that we could look a little bit further at the mitigation plan. And Jim wanted me to confirm
Excuse
that.
me a second, I'm sorry, Matt.
Everybody.
Do we need a quorum?
It's everybody.
It doesn't say continue now.
Oh, it's in the continued section.
Have a quorum.
But,
Well, the quorum is everybody that's here.
she's looking at the quorum.
It's
So,
everybody.
Okay.
What?
okay,
Sorry, Matt.
proceed.
It's okay. Jen wanted me to confirm the shed was placed on stone area. So we did those things. We submitted a revised plan, and I talked to Jen and pointed out that on the as-built plan for the certificate that, so as you know, we gotta submit as-built plans when we want a certificate of compliance. So on the old order of conditions, we did an as-built plan for that certificate of compliance, and it shows that there was a stone area where the shed was. So she was satisfied with that. We heard
Dad?
about,
Can I ask you to speak a little louder, please?
oh, really?
We
Yeah,
can't hear from
it,
that
it may be
microphone.
me.
not.
You're
Sure.
not the first, it's not, okay,
All right, sorry.
thank you.
So we looked at the mitigation areas, and there was we had two specific mitigation areas. There was a smaller one up near the addition that is located near the stairs to the pier. And we essentially moved almost all of that mitigation down to the lower area, closer to the stairs that go down to the beach. So we expanded all of that right at the top of the bank. We added some additional area in there. We left a little bit of area up at the top because we didn't want to plant so much that we blocked the access stairs to the beach. Between the two areas, we actually added more. We added another 30 square feet because it only left 20 square feet up there, so I figured we had a little bit more. So we actually increased the total area by 30 square feet from what was originally proposed. And as I said, we relocated it down closer to the resource areas, which was, I believe, suggested by a couple of people last time. We also took the two trees, well, there were 3 trees located up near the garage. We moved one of those trees down to the south of the house, and it's located right in the corner where the retaining wall is. We moved the tree down to that area. And we pulled the 2 other trees that are up there off the property line a little bit. We did talk to the neighbor after the meeting and was concerned about views. So we pulled the trees a little bit closer to the house, and they're actually now behind where the evergreens are. So we tried to minimize blocking of views in that area. I had a typo on the plan that I noticed when I was looking at this. I was calling out 7 evergreen trees to be relocated. It's actually 3 evergreen trees that are there, and there were 4 rhododendrons. Right. So everybody that worked on this plan and did the survey did everything right. I was the one that counted all those up and labeled them 7 trees. It's not, it's 3 trees that will be temporarily relocated and put back in place after the septic system's installed. So I just wanted to clarify that. That's really it for the changes. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Matt. Courtney?
No questions.
Maury?
Well, you did a good job, Matt. You pretty much did a lot of the things we asked. The only thing that I think I had asked was about the size of those trees, the root balls that they are, and where they're going to, being so close to the edge of the property, especially the ones.
So those are exactly 6-foot circles around those trees.
Yeah?
Just to give you perspective. Around the tree icon, that's a 6-foot circle.
Right, but if I'm scaling this, the trunk of the tree is 5 feet off the property line.
No, the edge of the 6-foot circle should be about that.
Is this the 1 to 20? Yeah. The proposed cupola, I'm taking my scale, I'm sitting on the thing.
All right, so the 6-foot circle is the edge of the root ball. So the trunk of the tree.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm going to the center of the, I am going to the center of the circle. I mean.
Why?
Why what?
Why are you going to the center of the circle?
Because that's where the
Well,
trunk
that's
would
where
be.
the trunk of the tree is. Well, if you'd like me to go to where the 6-foot edge of the ball is, the edge of the ball is only 2 feet off the property line. Am I at the wrong, maybe I have the wrong plan. It's late.
Wrong scale.
I've been up since 2 o'clock. No, I have a 1 to 20. Tell me where that tree is and tell me how far it is that lot line. This morning I was up.
Because I thought of you while I was.
And you used a
While I
different
was-
law, and you used a different scale.
While I was moving these things.
Okay, how much is it, Matt?
About 3 feet or so.
There you go. Maybe I
But
should have
that-
stayed in
that-
bed longer.
So
Huh?
this one over here, let's measure this one.
That's 4.
It's about 4, so.
Okay, so case in point, this is a tree that is supposed to grow. It cannot grow to its full and mature height on these people's property. It's going to go over the property. And not only that, but it's not the closest to the resource area. You have them literally, these are just as a screen, and the 2 on this side are just stuck over in the corner. They're not.
They're where we are taking out trees. They're in the same general area where we're cutting trees down. That's the logic behind it. And the tree trunk is not going to grow 4 feet over the property line.
I know the tree trunk isn't. The tree canopy does. I mean, unless you're.
Tree canopies do that, though.
I know that, Matt. That's why I want them further away from the property line, because you have to keep them on your property. Because when they go over the other property, then the people will cut them and they can't grow to full mature size.
All right. I like where you're going with it. We can move those over a little bit more for you.
Yeah, we'll just condition it. How's that? We condition it.
I think that's a great idea.
I think that's a wonderful idea. And all the mitigation, again, you know, we see these over and over, I'm not picking on you, Matt, but everybody jams them as screening. They're not mitigation planting. What they end up being is they're screening to their projects and their neighbors. And it's supposed to be, I mean, we have this beautiful salt marsh down here. All the mitigations in the BVW.
Just salt marsh right behind the BVW.
I know salt marsh here too, but it's also here. And anyway, and that's all lawn, so.
So you're talking about staggering?
We'll
Yeah,
talk
we'll
about
talk,
it.
well, it'd be in
We'll talk about it.
deliberation, because it won't be at 10 o'clock at night, 10:30.
Betsy?
I have no questions, Mary, thank you.
Jane?
Thank you, Matt.
Kevin? All set. Peter?
One question. In the revised print, did you indicate the limit of work for the contract?
Yes.
Okay, okay, I'm done.
You should see it right behind.
I'm done.
Right.
Turn that on, please.
Steve?
No, thank
All
you.
right.
I'd like to make a motion to close this hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
Excuse-
All
Wait.
right, yes, Mark?
I'm sorry, I wasn't here for the first hearing, but you're talking about 6 to 7 inch caliper?
Yes,
Two below, and the roof ball is gonna be how big?
About 6 feet.
Just
We-
6 feet?
I know.
We
That's-
discussed this.
I went over this with Patrick Dale.
All right.
Yes, sir.
I was wondering if there's an opportunity for.
Yes.
Yes,
Right now.
this is it.
Yep, we do our thing and then you do your thing.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the commission. I appreciate the opportunity to come in front of you one more time. My name is David Bone. I live at 27 Nichols Road, directly across the street from the property that you're looking at right now. I consider myself the most impacted abutter from the project. And I will try, as Mr. Bird says, I will try not to be the grumpy neighbor. I'm really trying.
You did a good job last time.
I'm trying. We purchased our house 2010. The critical thing about the house that attracted us in the first place was the wonderful view that we have across the property, which we don't own, which is owned by Mr. Sherman. And I feel like now that I've had the opportunity to actually look at the plan, I had not seen the plan before the last hearing. I was able to get a copy of the updated plan today. I understand it was filed a week ago. I chased it down today. And I'd just like to share a couple thoughts with you so that you can consider this in your deliberations on the project. And I just want to point to the plan.
Certainly.
It's all about the view and the impact of the view on our property. We are directly opposite Mr. Sherman's house at 27, right here. Essentially what happens with the addition, it's about, I don't know, I measured it, it's about 45 feet long, extending close to the property line. With the addition, the fact that we have a very high screen already here, these trees or shrubs are 10 to 12 feet tall, I don't know exactly, but they block our view. Then we have the house that exists. Now we're going to have another addition, two-story addition, that further blocks the view. Essentially, we will have no view across the property. I don't know if there's anything you can do about it, but I'm just stating my concerns. I understand the trees, the rhododendrons, and the three pine trees, I believe they're pine trees, I'm not sure. Roadway spruce, I don't know, they look like Christmas trees, exist here. They essentially, if one stands on my property and looks across the thing, I have no view whatsoever of the water now, except perhaps a little peeking over the top of the shrubs here. Maybe I can see the far distance across Wacoit Bay, and we're going to put these trees back. On top of it, the mitigation planting location dropped those two other trees that you asked about right here in that last little sliver of view shed. So I guess I'm grumpy. I wish I wasn't, but I would appreciate it if there are things that the town could require. I would ask for, really, there's three things that I can ask for. One, that these trees not be reinstalled here, all right, next to the septic system. They block a piece of the view. Two, that those two trees that were proposed here in this resource area be moved away from that view sliver, which we would have left. And 3, and we talked about this after the last hearing outside, after we left, we talked about lowering these shrubs or replacing them with something much more neighbor-friendly, if you would. They're 12 feet tall now. A 6-foot fence would be half as disruptive as that solid line of plantings. And I guess I'm asking that it be, that the requirement be that they be lowered. And my preference would be that they go away, which is what I told Mr. Sherman, but I think lowered to a reasonable height or replaced with something more reasonable to allow us to at least have some view off in this direction. So I just, from a being a good neighbor thing, that would be my request. So the trees here, the 2 mitigation plantings here, and lowering these shrubs. That's where I come down on it. Okay?
Thank you. We hear you. It's not really within our purview to worry about neighbors' view sheds, but we hear you.
Well, given that it is on a piece of property that you have control over the resources and the plantings that are going to be there to support those resources, I guess I would ask you to consider these requests. Okay?
Yes,
I wish him luck with the expansion if he decides to advance.
Thank you. Did you want to say something?
I did. I just wanted to leave you with one last thought about this when you go into your deliberation. That this project does in fact meet performance standards. That we are in a legally previously developed buffer. That nothing there is natural vegetation. That the trees themselves do not exhibit normal successional development stage. They have been altered. The limbs on them have been altered. I truly believe, as we documented in our narrative, that it does meet those performance standards by way of supplying the appropriate mitigation on a per cal per inch basis, and we've actually exceeded that, and by supplying mitigation on a 3-to-1 ratio, and we exceeded that. So I just want to leave that with you when you go into your deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you. So, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of closing the hearing say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, so moved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, so moved.
I was just gonna